Don't feel bad.
Come say hi.
Congrats. Yeah. I do. Good to see you again. Yes. That's right. I think I'm going to come for homecoming. Our alumni association asked me to come. So, yeah. So I'm going to come volunteer. Happy we're able to do that.
I know, one of our problems.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Can I get the mic on? Emily?
Good to see you, of course.
Emily,
Thank you.
can I get the mic
Thank you, I
on,
appreciate
please?
it.
Sure.
Thank you. That's great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Hello, everybody. If I can ask folks to get seated, we're going to get started in a second here. All right. Don't make me gavel this room quiet, people. Elisha, how are we doing with Channel 8? Channel 8's good?
They're looking to see if we have a strong or weak.
I know, right?
Come on.
All right. Wonderful to see so many people here. Lots of energy. Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday, October 19th regular meeting of the Boulder City Council. We're going to get started with an announcement. This is about the Better Public Meetings Project. So the City of Boulder is partnering with the National Civic League on a nationwide effort to make council meetings more engaging and satisfying for everyone who participates. Hopefully we'll engage and satisfy you this evening. As part of this effort, we want to hear about your experiences with our meetings. So we invite community members who are either in person or online for council meetings starting tonight and running through our December 7th meeting to rate your experience. We have an online scorecard that takes about 2 minutes to fill out. The link to it is on the screen now, and for the online audience, we're putting a link and QR code in the chat. You may complete the scorecard once for each time you participate in a council meeting over the next 3 months. All right, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. And Elisha, if we could do a roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. We'll start tonight's roll call as usual with Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present.
Friend.
Present virtually.
Joseph.
Present.
Spear.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallet.
Very present.
Councilmember Weiner.
Present.
And Yates.
Happy to be here.
Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thanks so much. And I'm going to, to start, I'm going to ask for a motion to amend the agenda to add item 1A, which is a declaration honoring Phil Stefano's many years of service to CU and the Boulder community, and item 5B2, which is an introduction and consideration of a motion to adopt by emergency measure ordinance 8613, amending the moratorium on the police oversight panel. And just to be clear, that's not adopting that. This is just adding it to the agenda. If I could maybe get a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous. And with that, if we can go to our first declaration, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item 1A is under call to order and roll call is a declaration honoring Phil Stefano's many years of service to CU and the Boulder community. That'll be presented by Councilmember Yates.
That's good.
Yeah. Could you stand in the center? Sure. That'd be great. This is a declaration honoring Chancellor Phil Stefano, October 19, 2023. Dr. Phil Stefano joined the University of Colorado Boulder in 1974 as an assistant professor of curriculum and instruction in the School of Education. Dr. Stefano has since seen the university from nearly every perspective: as a parent, a donor, a professor, a dean, the provost, and since his appointment in 2009 as the university's chancellor. As chancellor, Dr. Stefano has worked closely with students, faculty, staff, alumni, and donors, as well as industry and community leaders in extending CU Boulder's legacy as the preeminent national comprehensive research university. Chancellor DeStefano's strategic imperatives for the campus are to shape tomorrow's leaders, to be the top university for innovation, and to positively impact humanity. Chancellor DeStefano has worked closely with local and regional governments, especially the city of Boulder, the home of CU's flagship campus. During his tenure, strengthening town-gown relationship has been a major priority for the university and one that has resulted in numerous collaborations. The close partnership between the university and city leaders has led to significant progress on several fronts, including the development of CU South, the Limelight Hotel and Conference Center, the successful launch of the Right Here, Right Now Global Climate Summit, the improvement of safety and community relationships on the Hill, and the continuation and enhancement of a number of local traditions, including the Conference on World Affairs and the Pearl Street Stampede. Dr. DeStefano's appreciation for shared community values and his belief in strong reciprocal relationships have allowed the university and the city to flourish as we pursue mutually beneficial improvements. So we, the City Council of the City of Boulder, tonight recognize, honor, and appreciate the service and significant contributions to the city and to our community made by Chancellor Phil DeStefano. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you so much, Bob, and thank you, Aaron and City Council members, for this very kind recognition. I've been overwhelmed with gratitude by the warm wishes that I've received since announcing my plans to retire as Chancellor. A moment like this also provides plenty of opportunities for reflection. One of the things I'm most proud of from my term as Chancellor is what we've been able to accomplish from the university and the city working together over many years. Your leadership has been critical to the growth and success of the university as we envision major projects like those you just mentioned. And we made great progress across our community based on our shared values, things like sustainability, equity and inclusion, and innovation. The Boulder community's support of CU athletics, the arts, and student success is unparalleled, and is a huge part of what has made this role so rewarding and meaningful to me these last 15 years. Without a supportive and vibrant community like Boulder, there's no way the university would have been able to attract the world's best and brightest scientists, artists, researchers, teachers, leaders, and students to our campus. I have personally appreciated this council's open-mindedness, respect, and can-do attitude, attributes also shared by the City of Boulder staff. I will remain involved at the university in new roles, as well as in the community. This has been our home for Yvonne and me for more than 40 years. We raised our 3 daughters here, so we certainly intend to remain a part of the community and continue to enjoy all it has to offer, maybe even with a little bit more free time on our hands. So thank you again for this humbling recognition and for all you have done and continue to do for the university and this community. Thank you, and go Buffs!
Thank you, Phil.
All right, that was wonderful. Congratulations and thanks again, Phil, for everything that you've done for the university and the community. And we are now going to move to our next declaration, which is for Colorado Companies to Watch Month declaration presented by Council Member Weiner. And if we could invite any companies, representatives of any companies who are present to come on up to the dais. Come on down.
Small businesses, Small businesses play an important role in the Boulder economy, and for the past several years, we have taken a few minutes at City Council to recognize local small businesses named Colorado Companies to Watch. Colorado Companies to Watch is a unique program that recognizes outstanding second-stage companies, small businesses with 6 to 99 employees that are past the startup stage and that demonstrate success and strong potential for growth, exceptional entrepreneurial leadership, innovative products and processes, and economic impact, community enrichment, and positive corporate culture. This year, we are recognizing 4 small, fast-growing businesses that were named, I only need one of these, that were named 2023 Colorado Companies to Watch. I would like to invite you, our lone representative, to come forward. You're already here now for a reading of a declaration recognizing your achievement. Okay, here's this. Recognizing Colorado Companies to Watch from Boulder, October 19th, 2023. In 2009, the governor of Colorado initiated an annual Colorado Companies to Watch award program to recognize second-stage companies with high potential for future growth. Each year, for more than 1,000 nominations, only 50 small businesses in the state are selected for the award. Since the program began, 129 of the businesses named Colorado Companies to Watch have been from Boulder, reflecting the city's strength in innovation and entrepreneurship. In 2023, Colorado Companies to Watch honorees from Boulder include Ascent CFO Solutions, Cultivate, New Lastin, and Roof Nest. These 4 Boulder businesses represent a wide range of industries and are among the most visionary, innovative, successful, and impactful entrepreneurs in the state. These businesses exemplify creativity, innovation, and if that word one more time, entrepreneurial spirit, and support the community with the jobs and economic opportunity they provide, expenditures they make, and local taxes they pay. The City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado extends our gratitude for the many contributions these businesses make to the local community. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much. My name is Leah Garcia. I founded a company called New Lastin, which is a hair care and skin care company, direct to consumer, in 2016 because the DNA of Colorado is of entrepreneurship. So yes, I do agree. This is a big honor. I really appreciate it. We are past a stage where we are starting to scale and completely grow. This is truly a dream come true. I've actually never received a recognition for the 16 plus hours a day that I've been putting in for the last 5 years. So this is a tremendous, tremendous moment for me. Thank you very much, everyone. Here's to supporting local community and building our Colorado base and economy. Thank you.
That was great. Thanks so much. Now we're going to move on to our most delicious declaration of the year, which is that for Michelin recognized restaurants, presented by Councilmember Joseph. And if representatives of the restaurants could come on up to the dais.
Wow, thank you. That's wonderful to have all of you up here. This is great. Prior to giving out this declaration, I would like to offer some context. Boulder is home to an active and award-winning restaurant scene. Restaurants in the city are very important to this community. They feed us, provide employment opportunities, and contribute to our quality of life and economic vitality. Last year, Boulder restaurants sales generated over $18 million in tax revenues to help fund vital city services and important amenities. Bon Appetit magazine has called Boulder America's foodiest city, and Food and Wine named after Pearl Street one of the 10 best foodie streets in America. Other recognition has come from the James Beard Foundation, Wine Spectator, and the Food Network, among others. And now we can add the Michelin Guide to that list. This year, Colorado became the 8th Michelin destination in North America, and Boulder was among the cities visited by Michelin's anonymous inspectors who are specially trained to assess restaurant quality. Over multiple visits, restaurants were evaluated based on product quality, harmony of flavor, mastery of cooking techniques, voice and personality of the chefs as reflected in the cuisine, and consistency over time and across the entire menu. Tonight, we are recognizing the 9 Boulder restaurants who have been included in the Michelin Guide. Representatives from some of the restaurants are joining us tonight for the reading of this declaration recognizing their achievements. Honoring Boulder restaurants recognized by Michelin Guide, October 19th, 2023. Established in 1900 by the Michelin brothers to encourage motorists to travel around France, the Michelin Guide is an iconic source for culinary recommendations and inclusion, and the guide a sought-after honor. In 2023, several cities in Colorado were added to the more than 40 destinations around the world where specially trained Michelin inspectors assess restaurant quality. 9 Boulder restaurants have been selected for the inclusion into the Michelin Guide, and 2 received special awards. Basta, Black Belly Market, Boulder Duchambé Tea House, Bramble and Hare, Frasca Food and Wine, Oak at 14th, Cento, Stella's Cucina, Zo Mama. Kelly Kawachi of Black Belly Market received a Young Chef Culinary Professional Award, and Sergey Kifol and the front of house team of the Frasca Food and Wine received an Outstanding Service Award. These 9 Boulder restaurants represent a variety of cuisines and price ranges and reflects the city's award-winning food scenes. The City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado extends our congratulations to these businesses for their achievements and gratitude for their contributions to our community. And thank you. It is an honor to present you with these declarations today. Thank you. Would you like to add a few words?
And you're welcome to, although we only have time for a couple of sentences per restaurant.
I save you the pain of my accent. I'm Filippo from Stella. Thank you very much. That's amazing.
Jeff Foster, I'm the Director of Operations at Black Belly and Santo. It's an honor to be recognized and acknowledged up here, but thank you for coming to the restaurants. And 3 years ago when we were all eating in tents, I just wanted people back in seats, and I wanted to be able to serve the community, and it's a pleasure to do so. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jose Rodriguez. I'm behind Basta. I just want to congratulate everyone here. Great job, guys.
I'll pass it over here because Jeff is with us at Black Belly.
Edwin So with So Mama Restaurant, and this honor really goes to my mom, who does all the hard work.
I'm Eric from Bramble and Hare Restaurant and Black Hat Farm, and this is for all the people out in the fields who've been picking like crazy, and everybody in the restaurant. When we were awarded, recognized, it went off like a bomb in the restaurant, and everyone's so happy, so prideful. So thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Bobby Stuckey from Frasca Food and Wine with our chef in Palazzolo. We just feel so honored to have our restaurant on Pearl Street in Boulder and be part of this community. Thank you so much to the City of Boulder.
Hello, I'm Matt Carvalho here on behalf of the Boulder Dushanbe Tea House and Lenny and Sarah Martinelli, who are not able to be here tonight. They're in Tajikistan right now. I know that they are so grateful to be honored among these wonderful restaurants. So thank you all so much.
Congratulations to you all, and we look forward to eating at all of your establishments as sometime in the near future, I'm sure, if we can get a reservation. All right, and we are now going to go to open comment, and so Brenda, if you could read our public participation guidelines, please.
Yes, thank you, and good evening. My name is Brenda Rittenauer. I'm with our communication and engagement team. And my role this evening is to host the Zoom call, but also to remind everyone in person and on Zoom of our meeting guidelines so that we can all stay in good, productive conversation together. So Emily, if you'll show the slides, great, thank you. The city has engaged with community members to co-create a vision for productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and for council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experience, and political perspectives. For more information about this vision and the community engagement process we went through to reach it, you can go online to bouldercolorado.gov and search in the search bar, Productive Atmospheres. The following are examples of rules of decorum found in the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that support this vision. These will be upheld during tonight's meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters relating to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals online must display their whole name before they are allowed to speak. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. In-person participants are asked to refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with applause, with the exception of the wonderful declarations we heard tonight and other nights. Traditionally, support can be shown silently through American Sign Language applause, or jazz hands, or sparkle fingers. And with that, we can begin open comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. I hadn't heard sparkle fingers before. All right, we've got 15 in-person speakers and 2 remote speakers. I'll read 3 names at a time. If you can start to come on down as your turn is approaching. Each of you will have 2 minutes to speak. And our first 3 speakers are Kevin Glynn, Lisa Spalding, and Michelle Rodriguez.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Glynn, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the swimming community in Boulder.
Is the mic on?
Green light's on.
Is it high enough?
I'll hold it. All good? Better?
You just lean right into the mic, please.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. I'm speaking on behalf of the Boulder swimming community. We would like to, this is a group of over 1,000 people, youth to adults. This is age 8 and up. This is the core users group of the swimming pools in the city. So these people are swimming as much as 8 times a week. They're also paying for their water time through the club fees that go directly to the city to keep the pools open. The city has a wonderful plan to refurbish East, and that would include extending and enlarging the pool, and we're in favor of that. However, when that happens, we'll lose 36% of the water availability for the community. Therefore, we urge the City Council to direct Parks and Rec to cease planning on the East project until an alternative pool can be identified to compensate for the loss of East while it's under construction. Equally, when South is refurbished, whenever that is, and that plan is obviously still in flight, the same thing applies, that an extra pool would be available for the community to use. As a consequence to the direction for the city to cease planning on East until an alternative pool is secured to supplant that loss, we have a jewel in the community for swimming, and it's called Scott Carpenter. It's a wonderful pool, but it's not winterized. And we would ask the city direct Parks and Rec to create a new study, not one that's 5+ years old, that would seek to winterize Scott Carpenter so that we can all use it year round. This would alleviate all of the issues about closing east and closing south. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we have Lisa Spalding, Michelle Rodriguez, and Pablo Calderon.
Lisa Spalding, representing the University Hill Neighborhood Association, or UNA. When you consider item 3E of your consent agenda, UNA requests that you choose Ordinance 8605. This ordinance would leave in place the Special Hill liquor regulations introduced in 2013 until a public process can take place, which we hope would happen early next year. When the Planning Board considered these land use updates, which included removing the 2013 regulations, they unanimously recommended that you, in quotes, direct staff to undertake a robust public process that specifically and solely focuses on restaurant, brewpub, and tavern use standards and code enforcements in UGID, to develop a way to move forward that finds the right balance for all involved. That is all we want. We asked Dr. Tracy Toomey, a policy expert at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, who specializes in substance use control policies, especially those related to retail sales environments, if late-night bars still posed a threat. She pointed us to studies that found increases in vehicle car crashes, emergency room admissions, and alcohol-related assault injuries, when liquor sales were increased by 2 or more hours. Also, the CDC still recommends maintaining or limiting the hours of sales and regulating alcohol outlet density, 2 successful environmental strategies. If it makes you more comfortable adopting 8605 this evening, we would support removing the 50% food requirement. We know there are other compromises that we could make if we had the chance to work together on late night closings. Please give us that chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Now Michelle Rodriguez, Pablo Calderon, and Jan Burton.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to say real quick, I know you guys never know what to expect out of me, but I'm in a much lighter mood tonight, and I just wanted to say, because I'm not sure if I'll get that chance before the voting season, that there's some people I will really miss. I don't see Rachel here today, but I wanted to express my sincerest gratitude for all of those that hung in with the City Council and with this ordinance 8609 that is going to get the second reading tonight. You all deserve Purple Hearts for that, and I really appreciate everything that you all have contributed, as well as the police and the police panel, the new police monitor, Sherry Dawn, the police department and Chief Harold. Everybody's come such a long way, and I appreciate you guys' efforts to restore faith in the community for what has been a very daunting, last decade. And I really look forward to seeing where it's all going to lead. And thank you, and I appreciate you all.
Thanks for that, Michelle. And Rachel is present virtually, so she did hear that. Okay, now we have Pablo Calderon, and Jan Burton, and Evan Ravitz.
Hello, my name is Pablo Calderon. It's been known for years that the demand for lap swimming in Boulder exceeds the public supply. Situation is worsened by the shutdown of private pools and the fragility of the South Boulder Rec Center pool, closed for months last year. In this situation, closing East Boulder Community Center for renovations for an estimated 18 months, reducing the available lanes for about 36% is nothing less than a catastrophe for the Boulder swimming community. There needs to be a previous plan that compensates for the massive loss of swimming space. A reasonable solution is to install a retractable enclosure over Scott Carpenter, making it a winter indoor pool while it's still a summer outdoor pool. Designs meeting the highest energy efficiency standards exist, and some of them already running successfully in similar climates. We can have as many lanes as the 3 rec centers together for a fraction of the cost of renovating a single one. The catch is we need to reassess and adapt, which is a hard skill. But we ask you on behalf of the local swim programs, competitive and recreational, youth and adults, triathletes, water polo teams, and individuals such as myself that just want to stay healthy, to please stop and reevaluate. We have sent all of you an email with many more details about this. We sincerely hope that this is just the beginning of a longer conversation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pablo. Now we have Jan Burton, Evan Ravitz, and Reese Campbell.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Nuria. I'm Jan Burton from the Yes for 2A campaign. I'd like to give a progress report on our campaign. We've raised almost $30,000, mostly through the generous donations of Boulder's arts nonprofits, to create awareness of the tax extension and the facts: no new taxes, no cuts in existing services, a win-win for all recipients of the general fund dollars, including the arts sector. Yes on 2A has been endorsed by the Daily Camera, the Boulder Weekly, numerous political organizations, including Plan Boulder and the Boulder Progressives, and it was endorsed by the NAACP with the following quote from Jude Landsman. NAACP, Boulder County, supports ballot 2A, supporting arts and culture programming in Boulder. Through the arts, we as a community can defy stereotypes, share cultural identities, narratives, and values, and artists have always paved the way to freedom. The recently released by the city Arts and Economic Prosperity study indicates further growth in the impact of arts on our economy, and thus your tax revenues. In 2022, nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and their audiences generated about $115 million in economic activity in Boulder, supporting 2,450 jobs and generating $4.6 million of tax dollars to the city and the county. So the success of 2A will not just generate the sales tax you need to run your city, but the arts component will also generate more sales tax revenues for the city. In summary, we're pushing hard for the passage of 2A. Thank you very
Jan.
much.
Now we have Evan Ravitz, Reese Campbell, and Phoenix Salou.
So the city is finally looking into a legal camp for about 25 homeless folks. You've been talking about camps for at least 8 years, while hundreds have died, at least 2 frozen to death, dozens of frostbite cases, and many millions spent chasing the homeless round and round. Even if you actually open a camp for 25, that still leaves about 150 homeless who cannot or will not use the shelter for many excellent reasons, who you still will be chasing round and round at a cost of $3 million for next year, same as the last 2 years. Why would you want them in our faces, in our parks, and by our creeks when they could be in our many unused places? For years, I've wondered if whoever is running this town is waiting for vigilante action. As two-time British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli said, the world is run by very different personages than you would think. Well, you got that vigilantism 2 weeks ago with the guy driving his truck around Central Park trying to kill homeless people. The last time was in the 90s when 2 homeless guys were killed by the Arboretum. If you can't tolerate homeless people, as the country did by the millions in the Great Depression, I told you I'd start a Never Buy Boulder campaign. I just made my first order of staple foods from Costco and saved money compared to anywhere in Boulder, even without a membership, with free delivery. I urge others to look into it.
Thanks, Evan. Now I have Reese Campbell, Phoenix Salou, and Deborah Malden.
Hello, Mayor Brockett and City Council members.
Sorry, Reese, if you can get into the microphone, please.
Hello, Mayor Brockett and City Council
You
members.
can raise it up too.
My name is Reese Campbell, and I'm the president of Boulder Aquatic Masters swim team that has been offering structured swimming classes to the Boulder community for over 30 years. This team is a member of the Boulder Community Aquatics Coalition that consists of 5 other non-profit aquatics teams with over 1,200 combined members. Our swimmers range in age from 6 to 89. All teams in this coalition are very heavy users of the city's pools and recreation centers. In 2017, the Boulder Parks and Recreation Department made the correct decision to renovate the aging Scott Carpenter pool and recreation centers. A plan was created based on community input at that time. Without going into detail, the plan to renovate the recreation centers as it stands today, 8 years later, will leave swim teams in the coalition, everyday swimmers, as well as Boulder and Fairview High swim teams, with the potential for a 60+% reduction in pool space for several years. This will be a completely infeasible situation. Circumstances have changed significantly since 2017, and the priorities of that outdated plan must change accordingly. I'm here tonight to kindly ask that you provide direction and authority to our partners at Boulder Parks and Recreation to work with this coalition to adjust the plan. For example, one simple change could be covering the Scott Carpenter pool, making it a year-round facility, before closing down recreation centers for sustained periods of time. This will help maintain the health and vitality of thousands of swimmers in the Boulder community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reese. Now we have Phoenix Salou, Deborah Malden, and Philip Sneed.
Hi, Phoenix Salou. I wanted to bring up again the point of what it would take to begin redesigning for a more child-friendly world and being able to redesign our bathrooms especially. Going over to the library, it's excellent because there's a toilet that's fitted for my 3-year-old and it's perfect for her to use. So I just wanted to bring up again the possibility of, in lieu of being able to potentially install those toilets throughout the city, installing seat reducers for children and stools in bathrooms. It's going to be still a number of years before my kid is able to reach everything, so I wanted to speak on behalf of myself as a parent as well as all those other parents that I'm still trying to bring into council to speak on it as well. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Phoenix. Now Deborah Malden, then Philip Sneed, and Richard Beagle.
Well, hi, Deborah Malden. I'm here on behalf of the 2A campaign. Since I know you know that people should be voting based on facts, I'd like to correct misinformation that's been spread about issue 2A. 1, allocating general funds to the arts will not lead to cuts in city services. Budget staff have confirmed this. Most of you approved the sharing of 2A tax revenues. Another correction, the current 15-year CCRS tax does not provide dedicated arts funding. The original tax was passed by voters with strong support from Boulder's arts groups, since it dedicated 30% to arts facilities-related investments. But when the tax was first extended, only 10% went to the arts, and the current extension provides no dedicated arts funding, 0. It allocates 10% to all community nonprofits, 90% to the city, and no awards have been made to date. Critics of 2A have also ignored 2 important points. The library district, approved by voters last year, removes $10 million in library services expenses from the budget, specifically from the general fund. This bolsters the city's finances and financial flexibility by $10 million a year in perpetuity. This is more than 2.5 times the amount of funding that 2A would allocate to arts and culture. Point 2, the arts produce an outsized return on investment for city finances, as confirmed by the updated, just-released economic impact study commissioned by the city. Voting yes on 2A secures the stability of both city services and funding to strengthen the arts and culture ecosystem, a proven high-yield investment in Boulder's social, educational, and economic growth, and in the health and well-being of everyone in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Now, Philip Sneed, Richard Beagle, and Darren O'Connor.
Hello, I'm also here to urge support of 2A. I'm the president and CEO of the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, but prior to my appointment to that position in 2013, I was producing artistic director of the Colorado Shakespeare Festival here in Boulder. And I remain a resident of Boulder, so I have a perspective on the situation in both cities. The Arvada Center receives $4.3 million in funding from the city of Arvada every year, compared to the Dairy Center's funding of $50,000. This represents 32% of our annual budget of $13.4 million and is comparable to Loveland at $3.2 million and Fort Collins at $5 million, but far more than Boulder at a total of $1.8 million. 63% of our budget, about $8.4 million, goes to compensation and benefits to our 60 full-time year-round employees, plus hundreds of additional part-time, seasonal, and contracted personnel. We serve over 300,000 patrons a year to the center, including 67,000 students on field trips, of which 23,000 were from Title I schools and thus received free admission. Americans for the Arts recently released their 6th report on the arts and economic impact, which found that attendees at arts events spend an average of $38.46 beyond the cost of admission on local merchants. For the Arvada Center alone, this equals over $11.5 million annually to local merchants. All of this and more could be Boulder's with additional support for the arts, and as a concerned citizen, I urge support for 2A. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. I have Richard Beagle, Darren O'Connor, and Heather Novikis.
Mayor, City Council, having been a real estate developer for 30 years, I'm not used to 120 seconds, but I'll see what I can do.
And if you can get into the mic too, please.
Yeah, let's see. Is that adjustable? There we go. So when myself and my twin 8-year-old daughters moved to Boulder a year ago, I don't remember our location being described as the Valmont Raceway. I guess I missed that in the marketing materials. We're often awoken to the delight of the native fauna, that being the male peacocking activity of, I can burn more hydrocarbons louder than you can, crowd. These are male species that apparently feel that by modifying their underpowered vehicles to obnoxiously loud levels that they'll appeal to female species. However, I don't believe I've ever seen a female in these obnoxious one-occupant vehicles. Placing a sound meter in our backyard, I measured some of these vehicles as loud as 98 decibels. To give you a sense of how loud that is, 100 dB decibels is the noise level of an approaching subway or using a jackhammer. Other cities and states have come to recognize the damaging effect this loud noise has on children and have enacted laws. 14 states to date, including Colorado. Colorado's says in part, no person shall modify the exhaust system of a motor vehicle to increase the noise above that emitted by the muffler originally installed on the vehicle. Some jurisdictions have come to recognize having a law is not enough. It needs to be enforced. A number of cities in California and New York have installed sound cameras that are like the speed cameras. These sound cameras come equipped with a sound meter that, quote, records the decibel level as the vehicle approaches and passes the camera. Matt was kind enough to respond to an email that I sent, and I understand the city staff is in the process of preparing a resolution for city council consideration to allow the expansion of automated speed enforcement cameras with the recent passage of SB 23-200 earlier this year. What if we added sound cameras to that? I know in emailing a few of you that I've also gotten that it's in your neighborhood as well. Let's make Boulder a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Now we have Darren O'Connor, Heather Novikis, and Chris Allred.
Good evening, Council. Darren O'Connor speaking on my own behalf tonight. As you're no doubt aware, disturbing information has come to light about Boulder Police Department's Deputy Chief Redfern, information that has caused the NAACP Boulder County branch and affiliations and friends to swiftly respond. I feel the branch is justified in calling for Redfern's resignation or termination. It is troubling that Redfern was hired after the known history of Officer Lolitai, who only resigned after the history of use of force under color of law was, unsurprisingly, repeated on the job in Boulder. Redfern's known history is that he was the night shift duty captain for Aurora Police Department when Elijah McLean was killed after officers used force against him for what appears to have been the crime of walking while black. Redfern changed notes in the call logs for the incident from suspicious person to assault on an officer, though he admitted he never investigated McLean's alleged assaults. Aurora and many officers, including Redfern, were later sued for excessive force and for violating a group who gathered at a violin vigil's right to assemble on the Aurora Municipal Center Great Lawn. The federal complaint states that Redfern oversaw and directed officers at the vigil, declared the vigil unlawful despite their permission to be there from the city, and directed officers to use force and used force himself. His use of force included, according to the complaint, deploying a pepper foam fogger on the crowd. The plaintiffs in the lawsuit settled for $750,000. It's truly disturbing that the city of Boulder is defending Redfern's actions and their choice to continue his employment. Caught holding the bag, your answer is what bag? My answer is the steaming bag of law enforcement bad apple that is Deputy Chief Redfern. He should leave BPD before our community once again has to pay for the wrongs of a known bad apple police officer. Stop the pattern and practice of hiring those known bad apples, and start with terminating Redfern before he spoils the whole damn bunch. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Now we have Heather Novickis, Chris Allred, and Jeff Tench.
Hi, I'm Heather Novickis. Thank you for your time today. I'm here to talk about the value that the Riptide swim team provides to the youth of Boulder, and to create awareness of the challenges facing the team given limited year-round access to pool facilities, and to kindly request your guidance about how Riptide can best engage with the city to explore partnership that increases accessibility to aquatic assets for the purpose of securing future competitive swimming opportunities for our kids. Riptide serves the kids in Boulder's swimming community. The team is 9 years old and 165 swimmers strong. Riptide is cultivating a community of excellence and champion-mindedness by connecting hard work with success. Swimming outside and exercise contribute to positive mental health for kids. Compassion, growth, excellence are the values that drive Riptide. Riptide has claimed multiple state titles, sent athletes to sectionals and junior nationals, and just sent its first swimmer on to college on an athletic scholarship. The team is also helping other athletes with college recruiting. The coaches of Riptide have life-changing impact on kids. Swimmers tend to be empowered, successful students who attend college, earn degrees, and become good citizens who give back to their communities. Riptide swimmers are leaders, positive role models, and the team promotes community engagement and allyship. The challenges facing Riptide are centered around limited year-round pool access in Boulder, especially given recent closings of local clubs. Despite increasing numbers of youth swimmers in our community, access to Boulder pools for training is decreasing, and this is jeopardizing the future of the Riptide team. Historically, other teams have had to move outside of Boulder to find pool time, and now Riptide is also at risk of this future. Riptide is part of an established health-driven, physically active, swim-oriented community, and the kids need a voice. What can the city of Boulder do? Help the team by providing an entry point for engagement, reassess access to existing underutilized aquatic assets, and evaluate the needs of the community's young swimmers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Heather. Now we have Chris Allred, and then Jeff Tench is the last in-person testifier.
Good evening, Council. Hi, my name is Chris Allred. I live in Longmont, and I work in Boulder at Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. Tonight, I'm here to make a public comment about public comments. I've noticed protocols at various different city councils throughout the region, and I believe it's very important to be encouraging civic engagement. And I recall here, before the pandemic, that the council would allow people to sign up for open comment and public hearings in person the night of the event. And I think this is very important because there are times where in the realm of grassroots organizing, it is a busy week, and we may not learn about an agenda item until just a few days before it occurs at the council meeting. And so I think that the FBI task force is one very recently that I know that many people in the community cared about, and I think it was only brought to people's awareness 2 or 3 days beforehand. And we still had around 10 or 12 people to make a comment. And I know that tonight the police oversight panel is on the agenda for a public hearing, and I saw that only 4 people signed up. I'm sure that there are many others in the community who would like to speak on this topic because I know it's been of great interest through the years. So I think it could really help with civic engagement in the community if the council would reinstate in-person sign-up for public hearings and open comment. So I just wanted to make that comment tonight, and I was wondering what would be the best path forward to request this change in the procedure, if that was something that the council decides, or the agenda committee, or the city manager. So I would be really grateful for some direction there, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris. Now we have Jeff Tench, and I understand Lynn Siegel's present in chambers as well.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Tench. Thank you for all the council members for the opportunity to speak. I'm here tonight, like several others, to raise concerns about the ongoing supply-demand imbalance of swim lanes for our swimming community here in Boulder. I'm the parent of 2 children that are members of the Riptide swim team that you heard about a few minutes ago. And as we examine many of the documents that are on the city website related to programs associated with the aquatic plan in 2015, the upcoming proposed renovation of the East Boulder Rec Center, my request is that the council consider the changing circumstances in the supply-demand imbalance of available swimming lanes for both recreational youth and in some cases professional swimmers and athletes in the Boulder community. There's always a question of the availability of funds for these types of programs. There's some $40 million that's been earmarked for a renovation of a rec center that, while difficult, is going to actually remove access to swim lanes during that renovation. And in particular, the request here, as you've heard from several other members of the community, is to pause, to reevaluate the conditions that we find ourselves in here now 8 years on after the original swim study, and in particular, evaluate what approach may be taken to create a year-round facility at Scott Carpenter, given the current available technology, and in particular, evaluation of the use of funds that otherwise be placed in a direction that may work in the long term, but in the short term, further exacerbate the problem. So whether that's in the form of a direction to the Parks and Rec Department or otherwise, not understanding all of the protocols, humbly request that you consider what you've heard here tonight on that topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Lynn Siegel is our last in-person testifier.
In honor of the Michelin Awards to the food people. In honor of the food people that were recognized, there's something in the food industry called terroir, Terroir. It's way cool. It means the environment that creates the flavors in the food, like sourdough bread in San Francisco, either baked or the grain grown or something, is really different than, in another place, or just the environmental content of what goes into the making of the food. Okay, we know that 500 were killed in the hospital in Gaza 2 days ago. And I say, terroir, not terror. Not T-E-R-R-O-R, T-E-R-R-O-I-R. Food, not bombs. Just a new way to think of things. I was at the Chamber of Commerce meeting today from 7:30 to noon. It was fabulous. I only went because Tom Check was speaking, and I'm in the life sciences. I'm an ultrasound tech, and I have SomaLogic from Larry Gold, and I followed him. Oh, and what's so interesting is that Sophie, who is black, what's the name of it? The black belly. Her husband, they have a kid with a genetic disorder that Larry Gold from SomaLogic is working on. And so it's so wonderful, the dynamics of our community here in Boulder. It's fabulous. And the chamber, I've never been really to a chamber, well, probably I have since '87, but I was very inspired by the presentations. So just wanted to say that for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynn.
And the Financial Strategies Committee the night before.
Your time is up, but thank you for the positive comments. And our one online testifier is Travis LaBerge. So Travis, you're up.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Travis LaBerge. In an age of deliberate misinformation, it is all too easy to blend opinions with desires and then finish the cocktail with a conflation of cherry-picked alternative facts to deliver what would seem to be a compelling argument. Sadly, that is the case with people trying to defeat ballot measure 2A. The facts are simple. Data-driven studies continue to demonstrate that investing in the arts yields a positive economic return on investment for city coffers. The recently released facts from the Art and Economic Prosperity Study show that the arts sector delivers millions of dollars in tax revenues to the city of Boulder every year. It is a fact that compared to comparable cities, both in Colorado and around the country, Boulder has systematically underfunded the arts for decades. It is a fact that most arts nonprofits in Boulder provide programming for kids in schools that would otherwise not happen. For example, last year alone, Parlando School of Musical Arts provided over 1,400 Boulder music classrooms with on-site support during the school day, providing over 42,000 student interactions. And based on all of these facts, it is undeniable that passage of 2A will result in more children in schools being served while increasing City of Boulder coffers. In fact, it is entirely possible that the increase in sales tax generated by this investment will more than pay for itself. Time will tell if this is the case. However, given that voting for 2A will not increase taxes at all and will certainly pay for itself in part, I believe it is a wise investment. Thank you to the majority of City Council members who have chosen to embrace the data, to support the facts, and to endorse the passage of 2A. It's an easy win for public safety, human services, the arts, our schools, and our children. Thank you for your time and attention this evening.
Thank you, Travis. And with that, that brings us to the close of open comment. And I'll turn to staff for any responses.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Obviously, staff cannot comment on the ballot measure, and so we will not be doing that tonight. I will say that there's been a lot of conversation about pools, and we have our Director of Parks and Recreation here if council would like to, or actually, why don't you go ahead, Allie?
Yeah, certainly, Allie. I would invite you up if you wanted to address some of the...
And then I have one more thing to respond to.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Allie Rhodes, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boulder.
Get that mic a little closer.
Everybody, say it 5 more times, Aaron. I am Allie Rhodes. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Boulder. I want to thank everyone for coming down on a Thursday evening to talk about pools. Just to start with a fact that we value health and recreation in our community of all kinds. And that is the mission of Boulder Parks and Recreation. We do our best to do the most good that we can with the dollars that we have. And that means that we cannot do everything for everybody. But specifically around pools, I want to talk about the future of the Recreations Centers project in the East Boulder Community Center. As a reminder for City Council and for the edification of the folks behind me, that project was selected First, as we update facilities, because of findings from the 2021 Facilities Master Plan and the 2022 Parks and Recreation Plan, it's been prioritized based on its age, its condition, its energy consumption, and the broad variety of ages and interests it serves across the community. The renovation will improve warm water swimming, which, just as a reminder, can, in addition to kids, serve people with disabilities, older adults, anyone who can't do weight-bearing exercise, and has been a gap in our community since the Mapleton Therapy Pool closed almost a decade ago. That's a commitment we made in 2015 with the Aquatics Feasibility Plan. We absolutely will explore options to minimize impacts of construction. Projects are typically phased. You may not all remember our last major renovation of a recreation center was North Boulder in 2001. That project was phased. The gymnastics center was kept open for most of it because it was serving around 1,000 kids. And so they went around the back. It was yucky. I think there were some porta potties involved for a while, but the project was phased. I've talked to our colleagues in facilities. We think we can set up that project in a way to minimize impacts. For example, we can time construction on the pool to align with the outdoor pool season so that no major costly renovations of Scott Carpenter are necessary. It would be expensive to squeeze it in during that season, however, likely less expensive than major renovations to a built facility. Regarding winterization of Scott Carpenter Pool, for folks to know, we did explore that heavily in 2017. I understand community supply has changed in that time. What I don't think will have changed is the energy consumption of a temporary structure. What we heard from the community in the outreach for the design of Scott Carpenter was a few things. Yes, this is a lap swimming loving community. But we have 3 indoor recreation centers, and Scott Carpenter is an outdoor pool. People were not interested in it being a year-round indoor facility. So then you're exploring temporary structures. With facilities and fleet, we spent quite a bit of money to do a thorough feasibility study on tensile structures like the bubble at the Millennium Harvest or the YMCA pool in Lafayette. We explored the retractable structure that I believe Mr. Calderon mentioned. All of them were reviewed carefully for energy consumption, constructability, and then impacts on both the capital and operating budget. At the end of the day, none of those temporary structures met our energy goals because they're not fully built structures with a solid envelope that would hold the conditioned air necessary to keep the pool and people warm. And it would be very, very, very expensive. Both the capital and operating dollars were beyond our budget. So if there is interest in we exploring that, it would take a not a 5. We could come back to you in 2 weeks with more information on what that feasibility would look like to re-explore it. But I think it's going to be very, very, very expensive.
Thanks, Allie. Any questions for Allie while she's up here? Tara?
Do you have any plans that you want to share about what we could do to alleviate the situation that 18 months besides Scott Carpenter?
So I think, first of all, 18 months is not a number that came from us. I know you heard it there. That's not a number. So the pool construction, I don't have a timeline for that. What we would do is from the beginning in the RFP process, share our interests that we want this done as quickly as possible and in alignment phased with the outdoor pool season. There are other pool providers in the region, not in the city necessarily. I'm not sure about the university's current supply and use. Typically, that just depends. There are pools in other municipalities. So we would explore where else are there opportunities should there not be solutions with outdoor pools.
Bob?
Thanks, Allie. Allie, when you did the study in 2017, was there kind of just a swag on the numbers? Do you have any? I don't want to hold you to a number that's 6 years old, but
I'd like to remind you that they're 6 years old, and inflation's been a bit of a thing since then. So I am giving you 2017 numbers. For a tensile fabric roof enclosure, it was going to be, the design fees were not that much. The installation was around $500,000. It would include another $10,000, I believe, in the spring and another $10,000 in the fall for installation. They have a metal structure typically that holds them up. The utility costs were estimated to be $1 million a year, and then staffing would be in addition to that. So at that time, it was estimated to be around another $1 million. Our lifeguard costs have gone up more than 100% since then.
Does those numbers include heating the changing rooms and whatnot?
So that's a really good question. At that time, the cost does include winterization of the bathhouse. The city, with PRAB and City Council approval, chose not to go down that road. The bathhouse is not winterized, and to operate a pool, health code requires access to bathrooms and showers. And so if this were to be a temporary thing to be done during construction, you'd have to figure out, we were talking with facilities and fleet, I'm not sure winterizing the bathhouse makes the most sense. Perhaps it's temporary showers and restrooms in a pod-like system.
And so
we don't have a cost for that. That's going to.
Yeah, I didn't think you did.
So winterization of the bathhouse and updating these costs is what the work would look like over the next 2
Yeah, that
weeks.
was the question I was going to go to, Allie. So the notify would be to update and maybe do a deeper dive into the numbers.
And whatever cost that might be. We have some expertise in-house, but not all of it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Allie. Appreciate you being here with all that good information. Mary, did you have other things?
I did, and just I wanted to address one last thing, and it's unfortunate to hear tonight allegations against Deputy Chief Redfern. I know that we have been receiving numerous emails on the topic, and so I just wanted to note that we will be responding to each one of them. For tonight, I wanted to reiterate the following, which we have also said to others. At no time have there ever been allegations of misconduct against Redfern related to the investigation into Elijah McLean's death. To the contrary, Deputy Chief Redfern is serving as an expert witness for the Attorney General's office to support the prosecution of the officers involved in this case, his former colleagues. It was Deputy Chief Redfern who categorized what happened that night of Elijah McLean's death as a critical incident, which then ensured the incident was investigated and reviewed, allowing for the criminal charges to come forward. With regards to allegations made in the lawsuit regarding Deputy Chief Redfern's role in the violent protest, I'll say the allegations that the speaker mentioned were written by the plaintiff and include some incorrect information about the actions officers took at that protest. Specifically, Deputy Chief Redfern did not direct these actions and was dismissed as a defendant to the lawsuit as part of the settlement in this case. Deputy Chief Redfern was chosen to be Deputy Chief from a national search with an independent recruiter. He was vetted during an in-depth background investigation, and that investigation showed that he had retired from the Aurora Police Department after 22 years in good standing. Since coming to Boulder, he has demonstrated strong convictions and unwavering support for the Reimagining Policing Plan recently approved by Boulder City Council. Deputy Chief Redfern has served our community with integrity, honor, and compassion, and the city stands by him without hesitation.
Thank you for that, Naria. Therese, did you have anything?
I did. With respect to the question about how can public comment be changed, those are contained in the council procedures, so that's at the council's discretion. Should council have an interest in changing those, we would require a nod of 5 to move forward.
Thanks for that. Anything from City Council? Seeing none. Oh, wait, there's Rachel.
Hey, everyone. I did want to suggest that maybe the engagement subcommittee take up that request to be able to sign up for comments in person.
Okay. I guess we can forward that to the
engagement subcommittee.
The engagement subcommittee can consider your request. All right. Very good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming out and speaking tonight. We appreciate your input on all of those important topics. Elisha, if we can go to our consent agenda, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our consent agenda is item 3 on tonight's agenda, and it is consisting of items 3A through 3O.
Any comments or questions for the consent agenda?
I'd like to offer a comment before making a motion. I'd like to sort of just highlight that I'd be interested in asking my council colleagues to to continue item 3E to a date certain of November 2nd, so that we can just have that on consent November 2nd and then have a public hearing on November 16th. The main reason for this is...
Can you explain what the...
So item 3E is a two-part ordinance. It's Ordinance 8590 and 8605, and this has to do with sort of the third module of our use tables. And we had given staff direction and sort of where they wanted to go, and sort of focusing them on where Module 3 would go, and that's really emblematic in 8590. And then sort of recently, the planning board made a decision, sort of made a suggestion, I should say, to sort of pull something out. And I think we may need a little more time to kind of talk through the implications of that and how it might impact the ordinance or the overall objective of what we intended with 8590. And so just a couple weeks, just a little bit of breathing room, I think might be necessary for us to be able to talk through that. And then from which case we can put it on consent and then look to have that public comment and second reading on November 16th. So with that, I'm open for any questions about what I would be requesting before I make a motion. All right. Yeah, you've got. Mm-hmm.
Will that impact our ability to make comments or adjustments to that item when it comes up in front of council?
It shouldn't change any of our regular process. It just shifts it 2 weeks.
Thank you.
That's a good question. So with that, I'll make a motion to pass the agenda with an amendment to continue item 3E for a date certain of November 2nd.
I'll second that.
Great, we've got a motion and a second. Any further comments on this? Seeing none, if we could do a roll call, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. The roll call for the consent agenda will include approval for items A through D and F through O, and the continuation of item 3E. We'll start tonight's roll call with Councilmember Weiner.
Yes.
Yates.
Yes.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Spear.
Yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Wallach.
Yes.
The consent agenda, as motioned and amended, is hereby approved unanimously.
Thanks very much. If we can do our call-up check-in, please.
Our call-up check-ins check-in is item 4 on tonight's agenda. 4A is the concept plan review and comment request for a proposal to develop 3125 34th Street with 44 permanently affordable townhouse units with a mixture of 2-story, 2-bedroom units and 1-story, 1-bedroom units. The proposal shows a series of 4-plex layouts with 2 1-story units flanking 2 2-story units, and this is reviewed under case number LUR 2023-00031.
Any questions, comments, or desire to call this up? Seeing none, I'll just call on myself and say this is a Boulder Housing Partners project. Looks very promising with some missing middle housing, deed restricted affordable, and I thought the planning board had some good comments on this as well, but no interest in calling this up. Looks promising. And with that, if we can go to our first public hearing, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Our public hearings are item 5 on tonight's agenda. 5A is the consideration of the 4 following ordinances that are related to the 2024 budget. These ordinances are being considered for second reading and adoption. First ordinance is Ordinance 8495, which is adopting a budget for the city of Boulder. Second reading, of course, of 8596, which is establishing the 2023 City of Boulder property tax mill levies. Ordinance 8597 is appropriating money to defray expenses and liabilities of the City of Boulder. And the fourth ordinance is Ordinance 8598, which is amending chapters amending various chapters setting fees and definitions.
Thanks for that, Alicia. Nuria, you want to get us started here?
We have talked a lot about budget, Mayor, in this season, and so I am going to pass that straight to Mark Wolf.
Good evening, Council. Mark Wolf, Budget Officer. Happy to be with you again this evening and talk budget. We'll go quick since we have spent a lot of time on budget this season. If I can drive effectively, then we will go. Okay. So we will cover briefly, just as a reminder, the council approved changes from 2 weeks ago that are now included in the 2024 budget, and the brief overview of the total budget numbers, and then we'll be on to the public hearing. These were the 4 changes from our conversation 2 weeks ago that were approved on first reading, including additional funds for pavement management in the transportation fund. That was an additional $500,000 one time. We have additional support for community connectors and residents out of the general fund, $10,000 one time, with a note to revisit that as a potential ongoing expense as we look ahead to the 2025 budget. In addition to funds for underpass lighting and maintenance, that's an additional $30,000 ongoing in the transportation fund. And lastly, additional funds to support the ambassador program. That is a central area general improvement district expense. And I'll just note that that additional $103,000 was included in the district resolutions that you passed on consent. So that brings your total 2024 budget to $515.3 million, very similar to last year's budget. Again, that is because of a change in how we are budgeting for bond proceeds. The apples to apples comparison, excluding utilities, is a $400 million budget even, or 4.8% above 2023, and your general fund budget is $196.1 million, or 4.2% above 2023. And no change to this slide that we've showed, I think, about 4 times now. Ongoing sources and uses, which we watch very closely in the general fund. If the 0.15 sales and use tax is renewed, again, that number does not change based off of the decisions made 2 weeks ago. And that is the end of our brief presentation.
You really put the brief in that brief presentation there, Mark. Are you eager to get on to your next role here? Thanks so much for that. Any questions for Mark or other staff? No questions? Well, all right. We have been through this already, several steps. In that case, we can go to our public hearing. And we have one person signed up to speak, and that is Lynn Siegel. Lynn, you get 3 minutes.
Wow, you did something ahead of time. We were just talking in front of the Trident, as I told you last night, about, but I didn't tell you the specifics, Mark, about needing lights on the underpasses for when we're riding at night. And you've already got it in there. What? Yay. Okay. I don't know what's all in there. It was a short presentation, but I do want to say, if there's mill levy involved, and I have to go to the county too to do this, please, anything to lower my property tax burden. I'm 70 years old, fixed income, and just wanting to keep expenses down, and with all the inflation and everything else, I want deployable funds rather than my bag being taken and someone spending my $360. We need to somehow get funds into the hands of people. The small businesses that were talked about at the chamber meeting today, instead of a universal basic wage, or instead of a minimum wage, some other form of adding funds to service folks that need to be fed to stay here, for the business to stay here, right? And then that can reverse stimulate the whole situation and we'll have a much more thriving community. So that's all I could say, and I think you get that, Mark, and Nuria and all, and of course you guys run the place, right? So yay. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, come back to council. Any comments about the budget? I know somebody wants to say at least 1 or 2 sentences. Maybe that person is me. Nicole, go ahead.
I was just going to say great job. 2 words, not 2 sentences.
Yeah. Here. Yeah, extraordinary job. Yeah. It's really an impressive document. very people-centered, centered on Boulder values. So thank you for the work that you did to accomplish that. I believe we have to make 4 separate motions with 4 separate roll calls. Is that right?
Yes, sir. I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
All right. Who'd like to get in the driver's seat and get us going here?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
Where's the I move? I move on second reading consideration of a motion. Well, I move to adopt ordinance 8595 that adopts a budget for the city of Boulder, Colorado for the fiscal year commencing on the first day of January 2024 and ending on the last day of December 2024 and setting forth details in relation thereto.
Second.
Do a roll call, please.
Thank you, sir. We'll start the roll call for the approval of ordinance 8595 with Councilmember Yates.
Yes.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
And Councilmember Weiner.
Yes.
Ordinance 8595 is hereby approved unanimously.
Great. Who wants to go next? All right. Lauren.
I move to adopt ordinance 8596 that establishes the 2023 City of Boulder property tax mill levies, which are to be collected by the County of Boulder, State of Colorado, within the City of Boulder in 2024 for payment of expenditures by the City of Boulder, County of Boulder, State of Colorado, and setting forth details in relation thereto.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Alicia.
Yes, sir. We'll start this roll call for 8596 with Councilmember Benjamin.
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
Councilmember Weiner?
Yes.
And Yates.
Yes.
Ordinance 8596 is hereby approved unanimously.
Who wants to go next? Oh, Mark.
I move to adopt. I move to adopt ordinance 8597, appropriating money to defray expenses and liabilities of the city of Boulder, Colorado, for the 2024 fiscal year of the city of Boulder, commencing on the first day of January 2024 and ending on the last day of December 2024, and setting forth related details.
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
We'll start the roll call vote for ordinance 8597 with Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
Councilmember Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
And Benjamin.
Yes.
Ordinance 8597 is hereby approved unanimously.
All right, Matt.
All right, I make a motion to adopt ordinance 8598, amending chapter 4-20 fees, BRC 1981, and sections 3-8-3 tax imposed on non-residential and residential development 8-9-1, purpose and legislative intent of 8-9-2 and definitions, and 8-9-5, capital facility impact fee to be earmarked BRC 1981, changing certain fees and setting forth related details.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call, please, Alicia?
Yes, sir. Roll call for ordinance 8598 will begin with Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
Councilmember Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Benjamin?
Yes.
And Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Ordinance 8598 is hereby approved unanimously.
Thanks so much, and congratulations for all the amazing work. All right. We are running ahead of schedule.
Yes, perfect. Yeah. This is fine.
Pinch me moment.
Exactly. Can we move to our next public hearing, please, Alicia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Item 5B, our second public hearing on tonight's agenda, is the second reading and consideration of a motion to adopt Ordinance 8609, repealing and reenacting Chapter 2-11 Police Oversight of the BRC 1981, redefining the composition, duties, and powers of the city organization related to civilian oversight of the police and setting forth related details. And our second item is the introduction, consideration of a motion to order published by title only and adopt by emergency measure Ordinance 8613, amending the moratorium on the police oversight panel in the city of Boulder and setting forth related details.
Thanks, Nuri, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor. And before I pass this on to our consultant, Ms. Muscadin, who I believe all of you have met, I just wanted to note this has been a long time coming. I want to thank the members of the police oversight panel. They have been thoughtful and incredibly patient as we maneuvered through this. The working group that was brought together was, I thought, extraordinarily giving of their time to really think through these revisions of the ordinance. And I think that the product and the recommendations that we have before you are tremendous. And I appreciate council's indulgence, as there were so many things that we had moved that it was easier to repeal and adopt new than it was to do the series of redlining. But really just appreciate everyone's endeavor. I also just wanted to make a note that there had been quite a bit of community feedback and some conversation with community as well, and wanted to thank all of those who lend their voice to this ordinance. And with that, I will pass it on to our consultant, Ms. Muscadin, to introduce herself and kick us off.
Thank you, Nuria. Good evening, Council. Farah Muscadin. I'm
Farah,
really
can you get a
excited.
little closer in,
closer?
please? Yep.
Okay, sorry. Good evening, Council. Farah Muscadin, consultant to the City of Boulder. I'm really excited to be here, really excited to be at this point. You know, a lot of work went into this, and I know the city has been thinking about and mulling over what police oversight should look like for Boulder for quite some time, clearly even before I came on, and has been a topic of mine since, well, obviously topic of mine since February when I was brought on, and we hopefully reached a point of satisfaction with what we're going to propose to you. Perfection was never a goal, but what we wanted to do is clarify the role and the purpose of the panel. What we wanted to do is address some of the roadblocks that the panel has experienced since its inception, and also take this opportunity, since we're looking at the ordinance, to broaden a little bit of their role. And so the presentation will give you kind of a summary of how we got here, an overview of the changes, and then some very direct conversation about the community feedback that we've received. Still closer? Okay, sorry. Okay. Let me come in a little bit closer, maybe that'll help.
You can also tilt it
Tilt
from
it?
the there you go. Like
okay.
that.
I think it's really important, obviously, because community feedback is such a huge part of police oversight, to talk about that directly, particularly as it relates to the selection process, and just also give you the feedback of the work group. I would remiss if I did not extend my appreciation to the work group. We met every Tuesday for 2+ hours for 2.5, almost 3 months. And they came prepared to every single meeting. They came to debate. Some of the meetings were tough, but like most things when you're dealing with policy, we came to a middle ground. I really anticipated, I'm on a tangent a little bit, but I really anticipated having to bring you my own separate recommendation. But as we work through together in the work group, you have one recommendation that we stand by as a group. And I'm really proud of that, because I really thought I was gonna come to you with my own separate recommendation, and that would have been a little bit of a pickle. But through our conversation and through our work together, we came forward with a document that we're really proud of. So I'm truly, sincerely excited to present it to you tonight. Let's see. So in the agenda for today, we're going to go through the timeline, basically how we got here, the police oversight ordinance work group. I want to explain a little bit about what's in your council packet. Then we'll go in depth about the proposed changes, an overview of the community feedback, and then next steps. Because it doesn't, if it's passed today, it doesn't end today. The work still continues. And I hope that expectation and understanding with community is out there, that we still will continue to have conversations and really build the foundation around our oversight system in Boulder after today. And then we'll go to questions and answers. Oh, I hit the wrong button. Okay, here we go. So again, I was brought on in February. And in March and April, I had the pleasure of talking to so many community members and stakeholders to really understand, because police oversight is so unique to its community. I needed to speak to community. I needed to speak to the panel members. I spoke to obviously current and former council members. I spoke to community members that were on the task force. I spoke to various organizations that were involved or interested parties in police oversight to really get a full understanding of what their understanding of police oversight was, what their expectations were. And as from a consultant standpoint, it was very important that I had that grounding and understanding. Then in June, we started meeting with the police oversight work group, and we continued to meet through August. We had a community session in June to really get feedback about what do you feel about the current ordinance? What is your perspective about that? And that was really important to get a sense of what community's perspective was of the current ordinance. And then our last meeting was August 29th. Our last couple of meetings with the work group, we went through the draft line by line, just to make sure that we had it right and that the changes that we were looking to make were in there. And a tedious task, but we did it. And the work group was pretty firm on that being our last meeting. So we did what we needed to do to get there. And then the draft went to legal review. And that took a couple weeks. But then we publicly released it to council, the community, to the panel on September 13th. That actually was a day of a panel meeting, and I gave a presentation to the panel going over the proposed changes on that date. So we had community feedback sessions, one virtual, one in person, in September to get feedback on the draft. And generally, the feedback was very positive. I'll go into more specifics of that later, but overall, the feedback was pretty supportive about the changes. And then we submitted our council packet on the 28th, then first reading on the 5th, and now we're here today. Very excited to be here today. So in your packet, you have the proposed changes, which is now 8609. I think just the complete draft of what the proposed changes would be. And then you have feedback that was given by 3 panel members. And then item C is a memo that I wrote about the initial feedback that I got from community stakeholders pretty early on in our process in that March-April timeframe. And then a summary of our feedback from our community session in person on June 21st. And then a summary of the community feedback we received in September of the proposed changes. And then I was asked to look at comparable cities to Boulder and the makeup of their police oversight. And to my surprise, actually, it's very comparable in terms of size. The average number is about 4 panels across the country for the cities that I looked at. And then the final attachment in your packet was the red line, so you could see how extensive the changes were, and they were pretty extensive. So holistically, it kind of gives you the map of what we looked at and the work that was put into this process. So I mentioned this, we had a very, very thoughtful and considerate and engaged police oversight work group that was composed of 2 current panel members, one that had been on the panel and one newer member. I thought that perspective was really important to have on the work group. We had a formal panel member, a representative from Centro Amistad, a representative from the NAACP, a city attorney representative, and a BPD representative. All right, now into the meat and potatoes. So when I've discussed the changes, I really I think it's important to talk about what is totally different and what we added. So essentially, what the biggest changes in terms of what was changed or removed from the draft relate to the selection and removal of panel members. That's a big change, which we'll get into further. And then also there was language in the current ordinance about kind of evaluation of the monitor by the panel. We removed all of that language. So I want to be very transparent about the bigger changes that were made in the draft. And then in terms on the right, what we added was a purpose statement. One of the conversations that I had in the beginning was if I asked 10 different people about the purpose of the panel, I got 10 different answers. And I'm just being frank, maybe I was a little too frank, but we really should have one understanding of what the panel does and what their role is. And the purpose statement is our attempt to do that, to be very clear about what the purpose of oversight is for the City of Boulder. And a big change was that we're recommending is the ability for not only the panel but the monitor to review critical incidents, and we'll get into that further. We changed panel qualifications, terms, and this was a recommendation from one of our work group members who thought that it was important that we clearly delineate the authority that the panel has around making recommendations. So you'll see in the draft, they have clear authority to make recommendations around disposition, discipline, and policy, and those are separate sections in the draft. We changed training. We added a section about obligations to the chief, particularly as it relates to responding to formal correspondence by the monitor and the panel. We put in, and I believe this was at a request of a council member, looking at evaluating the oversight system on a we put 5 years basis so that we always come back and say, okay, is it effective? Are we achieving the goal of what we want to do? We set that in the ordinance, and then we addressed outside counsel, which I know you've heard from community has been a topic for quite some time. The purpose statement. So essentially, this is one of our first tasks as the work group, and we came together to draft something that we thought would represent what the purpose of civilian oversight is for Boulder and also the purpose of the panel. The one thing that I want to point out too is that we specifically and intentionally included that the panel and the oversight system would adhere to the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, to their code of ethics. And that's really important in terms of setting the standard and the expectation for your oversight system. So if this ordinance is adopted, Boulder will be listed as a city that adheres to these code of ethics. It's a national organization, it's the expert on police oversight, and I think it's really important of setting the stage of where we're going with oversight in Boulder. Appointment of the panel members. We kept the number at 11, but we did recommend the change of the appointment from council to the city manager. The work group felt very strongly needing to have student representation, so we designated 2 spots. So of the 11, 2 specific spots will be for students, and they cannot be filled with non-students. They will be for students. So if, for example, students aren't available, then the panel will move forward with 9. But they felt very strongly, students have interactions with BPD, that their voice needed to be at the table. The work group felt actually very strongly about that. It does say that the city manager shall seek community input regarding the selection process. And also promote public awareness about the panel, its vacancies, and the roles and responsibilities. We'll talk into this further as this has been pretty significant community feedback about whether or not the city manager shall or may form an advisory committee for the selection process. So we wanted to be clear that when there is an advisory committee, what the qualifications and what the types of community members the city manager should look for in terms of their participation on the advisory committee. And we obviously wanted to lift the voices of those who historically have had negative interactions with law enforcement. We felt it was important to include current and former panel members. As a former police monitor, I thought it was very important to include the monitor in the process. They tend to be the glue in terms of really helping not only recruit, but help retain and train panel members. And then the other part that is really important, and I'm kind of geeking out a little bit, but that the advisory committee would also have to go through a training about civilian oversight and the civilian oversight of Boulder, so that they at least have a grounding of knowing what the system is before they can make a recommendation as to who should serve, right? It's just a basic understanding. And that was overwhelmingly agreed to by the work group. So going to the point that probably you've heard pretty significantly from community feedback is the shall versus may as it relates to the advisory committee. And I'll be very forthright with you. In our first draft as a work group, the language says shall. And we discussed it a lot. And we went back and forth about it, and we changed it to may primarily to allow flexibility of the city manager in terms of the process. We talked about how being on an advisory committee is time-consuming in terms of the process of going through applications, reviewing applications, interviewing, and all that, all of the things that go into a selection process. But obviously, given the guidance that we gave about the advisory committee, we felt that it was important to have one, but not necessarily. It may not necessarily be needed at every single point that there is a vacancy on the panel, and particularly it may not necessarily be needed as you're talking about students who will serve and who will probably rotate on an annual basis. And so those are those things that we considered in terms of the shall versus may in the work group. I don't think that the work group is firm in either way, particularly when we started out as shall. But just understanding that if it's changed to shall, that means that every time that there's a vacancy, that the advisory committee would need to be formed. We do have language in the draft that talks about, we increase the alternates from 3 to 5. And there's specific language in the draft that says when there's only one alternate left, that triggers a selection process. So hopefully there will be a pipeline of potential panelists to serve that may alleviate having, recurring advisory committee. But it was the intention, obviously, of the work group that community be involved. You have to have community involved in police oversight. They just go hand in hand. So I want to make sure that that was clear, but also understanding why we changed from shall to may. Panel member qualifications. And so the other part of the reason why we're really proud of this draft is that every work group member has a line, a sentence, a section that they really had their hand in. And this particular section was drafted and thought through by one of our panel, or actually our NAACP representative, who was really thoughtful in giving us suggestions in terms of what the qualifications should be. And so they really wanted a strong connection to Boulder. That was very important to every single member of the work group. We talked about being fair-minded, objective, and impartial. And those are the types of quality people, well, how do you ascertain that is the question that I've gotten before. And you ascertain that through your selection process. You ascertain that through your questions that you ask in the application process, the questions that you ask in your interview, and also as a former monitor, I also talk to potential panel members because I felt like it was my role to ensure that they understood what they were signing up for and the type of work that it entails to be in this volunteer capacity. So there are plenty of ways to ascertain that, and it is also a standard. You will see any combination of those 3 words in pretty much every single oversight ordinance across the country. Objectivity is a very significant part of being part of oversight. Then we talked about qualifications that they may have, including valuing equity, diversity, and inclusion, understanding of relevant laws, and then we thought it was important to say that it does not require a panel member to be a U.S. citizen. We changed the panel member terms. So right now the max term is 6 years. We changed it to 4 years, so they would serve 3 and 1. So meaning a 3-year term and potentially extend to a 1-year, or a 2-year term and extend to another 2-year term. Students will serve 1-year terms with a max of 2. Essentially we thought, 6 years was a long time. and you want continuity, you want people to be able to serve. This is really hard work. And you don't know how hard it is until you get into it. And so we really wanted to make sure that this allowed for some sustainability, because generally across the country, it's hard to maintain panel members on oversight panels. Panel training. And so this was also a big change in that we have two sections of training. One section that talks about training the panel members must have prior to taking their first vote. This is a big deal because essentially what this is saying is that we want the new panel members to be grounded in the work that they're going to embark upon and have an understanding of not only city policies, but also policing policies and trends in police oversight and understanding the oversight system that they are volunteering for. The second half is annual training that they will now be required to have. And one of the biggest changes is the requirement of either a 4-hour ride-along with a BPD patrol officer or a 2-hour walk-along. And this is really important. Most complaints come from patrol. And so seeing that side, I think, is really important and sometimes can be very eye-opening for members who serve on volunteer civilian oversight panels. So we felt it was important to include that in the requirement for training. The interrelationship between the monitor and panel. This was one of the things that was on my list of things that I wanted to work on specifically as a former monitor, but really establishing as separate complementary entities. And so the monitor will serve as a liaison to the panel, as a subject matter expert. Current practices, it says in the ordinance right now when there's communication with the complainant that would be done by the panel. That is not a standard or a best practice. It's usually done by the monitor or the staff, not the volunteer. So we changed that. But I think it's important to have separate entities that work in accord with one another and not have situations where there could be conflict with that. And so that's why we changed it and wanted to be clear about the type of relationship we wanted the monitor and the panel to have. I alluded to this earlier about panel recommendations. Again, this was a recommendation specifically from one of our work group members to separately delineate what the panel could do as it relates to disposition. And essentially, we increase the transparency of it. So when we talk about disposition, we talk about whether or not a complaint should be exonerated, unfounded, sustained. And so if there's a disagreement or that the panel now can write an objection, and that objection can be made public. That is towards increasing transparency. We heard from community that it wasn't clear enough in the current ordinance that the panel could make recommendations on policy. Well, we made it very clear that they can do that, that they can make recommendations on policies, procedures, and practices of the police department, and really looking at policy that ensures that it reflects community values, and that they are effective and accountable of police department employees. So that we definitely clarified. The other part is discipline recommendations, and this has taken 2 parts. The panel was always able to make, discipline recommendations prior to the chief decision. But one of the things, and I know you've heard this from community, is what happens when there's a disagreement on discipline. And so we really had to figure out what a possible solution was outside of kind of removing discipline authority from the chief, which is not a best practice, which is a rare instance, right? And so we thought about, particularly when you look at one side of it is, generally speaking, there's agreement on discipline. It's rare when there's a disagreement on discipline. And I can tell you as a former monitor that I can think of 3 occurrences out of a lot of discipline hearings that I attend to that I disagreed with the police chief. So it is generally rare. But when there is a disagreement, it's generally on a big case too, or a big situation. And so what we thought about is creating an environment where the panel members that actually reviewed the complaint, the investigation, sit down with the chief, right? So we specifically say, who can participate in the meeting, right? Who can be present? So the panel members that did the review, the police chief, the chief of staff, the sergeant from Professional Standards Unit, the monitor, and they sit down and they talk about their difference of agreement, Right. And so it's not, our intention is not so that they could be agreement. Their intention is to have a conversation and to create an environment where they can do that and come to a point where they can have a meeting of the minds. And so we talked about obviously saying where it can have, where our intention was for it to be held in a neutral location. And that it should be held in a reasonable time after a final decision was made. And so this was our attempt to get at a compromise of how we can deal with disagreements on discipline. The one other thing I want to point out is that we're also talking about serious discipline. We're talking about when an officer is looking at termination, demotion, suspension, or transfer, that in those instances, either the chief or the panel member can ask for an after-action meeting to discuss their disagreement. You guys have heard me say this, how big of a deal this is. This is a really big deal as a civilian oversight practitioner, is giving the panel and the monitor the authority to review critical incidents. This is a really big deal. This is a fundamental purpose of civilian oversight, of why it's been created across the country, because it's usually from a serious use of force incident involving a civilian and a police officer. And so we took the definition of critical incidents from the BPD general order, so it's consistent. And we took the definition of serious bodily injury from the Colorado Criminal Code, so that, again, it's consistent. So essentially, if there's an officer-involved shooting, the panel and the monitor can review it. Right now, they would need a complaint. And I have to tell you, someone who's deceased is not going to do a complaint. Right? Someone who's seriously injured or incapacitated is not going to do a complaint, right? Someone who may have a charge against them, like, for example, let's say resisting arrest, most attorneys are going to tell them not to file a complaint, right? So it goes against the purpose of oversight for them to need a complaint on a critical incident. So we remove that, and so now it's automatic. As a point of transparency, I want to be clear, particularly with community, is that we're asking for the authority for the panel and the monitor to be able to do this, but we have to build the infrastructure for them to be able to do that. This is new. This is brand new. And so, again, when I alluded to that the work doesn't stop today, this is the work that we're going to have to do going forward, is building the infrastructure in terms of how the panel and the monitor is going to be able to do this going forward. So I just want to be clear about that this is not automatic. It's not like if there's a shooting tomorrow, the panel is going to be able to review it the next day. It doesn't work that way. There's going to be processes that we're going to have to build to be able to do it, but at least they have the clear authority now in this draft. And then the obligations of the chief of police. And so essentially we are asking that the chief respond to written correspondence from the panel or the monitor. We are asking that if the police department declines to implement a recommendation from the panel, that they create a written record, and also that it be made available to council, the city manager, and the public. Again, this is an attempt to increase transparency within the system and within the police department. Additional changes. I alluded to this already about the evaluation system, that it be evaluated every 5 years to assess its effectiveness and just to review to make sure that we are meeting expectations and that we're meeting the outcomes that we want with our oversight structure. And then again, codifying the ability for not only the panel, but also the monitor to request outside counsel. And of course, this needed to go through legal review, and we had to make sure that this language that we drafted was consistent with the charter, because obviously the charter has the authority here. And this language is consistent with the authority, so it will allow the panel or monitor to request outside counsel through the city attorney's office. All right, community feedback. So the very positive community feedback in terms of the core functions of the panel, particularly around recommendations. Very supportive of the chief of police responding to recommendations from the panel and monitor, and also obviously strong support for community being a part of the selection process. In terms of the recommended changes, you've heard this, of changing the may to shall for the advisory committee. We've talked about that pretty significantly. The other feedback that we got, and I'll be honest with you, we have sections in there where we talk about reasonable time. In our drafts, we had put 60 days. And then we thought, well, life happens, scheduling is difficult. What if you don't do the after action meeting in 60 days, are you now going to be in violation of the ordinance? Those are the types of conversations that we had at a work group. So we thought that it would just be better to leave it a little bit more fluid and to keep reasonable time. But I understand communities' sense on this because they think, oh, well, what if it's 18 months later? We had those conversations, but we felt that, again, having a little bit of flexibility was better in the draft than saying to be done within 90 days. But that's something that we went back and forth on in the work group. There was a recommendation to set a minimum number of community outreach events that the panel holds. I think that's a little bit difficult. I think there should be some flexibility on the panel on how often they hold community events. A recommendation to establish specific staff and monetary resources for the panel has been a recommendation. And this is one thing for the last bullet that I want to point out and speak to directly. I've been doing legislative drafting for a really long time, and every once in a while you have a drafting error. And so this specifically talks about the panel's ability to establish policies, procedures, and operating procedures. It was no way ever the intent for the work group to change that. It actually was just put in the wrong section. So we're going to change it to where it should have been in the initial draft. This is a non-substantive change. It's just that it's the exact same language in the current draft was transferred over in the new draft. We just put it in the wrong section. And so we want to make that very clear that the panel will be able to establish its bylaws and policies and operating principles. That was just a drafting, formatting error, actually. Next steps. And so the panel members have been very specific and persistent about requesting a specific training about this ordinance upon passage. And so we will be working with city legal and the monitor to ensure that that happens. And then again, as I mentioned, the work doesn't stop. We still have to develop policies. We have to develop policies and procedures around the selection process, around the training schedule, and creating a library for the panel that they could use when needed. We really want to formalize onboarding to make it consistent so that it's basically a well-oiled machine. Every time we have a new panel member, it's the same process every single time. I already talked about the back-end work that's going to be needing to be done for critical incidents and review of serious bodily injury. And then also, and the panel is aware, because we've talked about it pretty consistently, upon passage of this, we're going to have to cross-reference the draft with their current bylaws, and their bylaws will need to be updated. And so that's something that they are fully aware that they will need to work on. And again, why the work doesn't end today. And so I have the pleasure of introducing and bringing up two work members that are also current panel members that would like to give their thoughts about the process and their serving, if that's okay. So we have one in person and also one online. Mayor, do you have a preference on who you would like to go first?
Well, very happy to hear from them, and perhaps Soledad, the in-person person, could come up and speak to us, and then we'll go to Hadassah online.
Good evening, everyone. Am I sounding okay? Okay,
Yep.
no, I want to eat this. Okay, so
And if you can just introduce yourself first.
my name is Soledad Diaz. I use she, her pronouns. And I'm a current panel member from the new appointed panel members this year. And a part of the work group. And we came in, new panel members, to a very interesting, right, first couple of months, let's say that. And it became very clear that there was a big challenge ahead of us and that we needed to tackle that. And it was important, I think, for the work group to have all the as diverse input as possible in the work group, and I think we achieved that. Having a co-chair in the panel, in the work group, having a former panel member, having a new incoming panel member, myself. Actually, that's where most conversation happened because, you know, there's different perceptions and there's a lot of agreement that comes after a conversation. So I think it was a very rich couple of months of weekly discussions. I have to say that it was a very in-depth work We will receive emails on Friday to prepare for our Tuesday 2-hour-ish meeting. So we all came prepared to talk the topics that we were going to discuss, and then we will receive another email that Friday, kind of wrapping up the work and preparing for the next week. We came back and forth many times to each of the lines of the ordinance you have before you. It's not perfect, but it is perfectible, as everything should be. Is so much better than what we have. And I think this draft, if approved, allows us to get back to work, which is most of us are what we want to do. We want to go back to work. We want to kind of address the next step that we have in front of us. We need to update our bylaws. We need to create procedures. We need to get that done. And also, we need to respond to the community. As volunteers, our primary job is to respond to the complaints, and we haven't been able to do that. And I think it's important that we didn't, so we could focus on this. I can honestly say that I couldn't never be in the work group as involved and as focused as we were if we would have been continue working with the panel obligation. So I think it was the right move at that time. Finally, I think I want to thank everyone involved in the process, because I can tell you that I can witness the investment that came into this ordinance and the awareness of how important this is for our city. The awareness that we need to aim for diversity and to bring community members that don't have a voice. So I'm very, very proud of the work we did. We didn't lose sight of that at any point. Having a Boulder PD representative at the table also provide us a very good perspective when we were having tough conversations. And I think that what we accomplish, again, we were not aiming for perfection, but I think is a very, very good next step. Of course, we appreciate what we had before, and this is a true improvement, and we want to get back to work. And there are things that we can fix. I think make sure that administrative, I guess, movement of that misplacement of one phrase. Probably there's going to be more. Probably we're missing a lot. Probably as we create policies and procedures, we're going to learn that, oops, we missed something. But we're in a very good place. And we have very smart people. We have a new monitor. We have great people at the table, and I think we can move forward, and we can do a great job with this ordinance. So, yeah, that's my feedback, and thank you all for the support, and thank you for this discussion too, and being part of that. And I'm sorry, I should say, we did make a very intentional effort to gather community feedback before the work group started the work and after, and that was also always in consideration. So anyway, thank you very much, and I think Hadassah is right after me. Okay, thank you.
Well, Soledad, thank you so much for that, and thank you so much for your service on the panel and on the working group. Much, much appreciated. And we may have a question for you, we'll see once we get to questions, but so don't go anywhere. And now Hadassah, if we can turn to you, please.
Thank you, Aaron. My name is Hadassah Villalobos. I'm a current co-chair and current panelist on the police oversight panel. I've been on since the inception, so I'm one of the original panelists. And, as mentioned, I was part of the working group. I do feel very proud of the work we put together. I feel like, as mentioned, the group was a very good collaboration of all of the different parties of the community. And I feel like, you know, there were some things obviously that we came in with a different perspective, and I feel like even through all of those very tough conversations, we all sort of came to a good consensus. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm very excited for this new ordinance. I think there are some great things that we implemented, especially the automatic review. So if there is something that does come up for us, we will be able to automatically have this process initiated and not it be so, you know, clunky and like it would just be in, you know, on autoplay basically, and wouldn't necessarily involve a moratorium and all these other things that were just a little complicating this time. And so, yeah, I mean, I think with the movement, as Farah mentioned, the two, you know, the two main things is the shall versus may. I'm definitely in the shall camp, you know, in terms of feedback that we heard from community at both of the community events that we had, that was the response as well. And so I think, you know, personally I feel that way, and my sense from the community and hearing from what community had to say was also the same. And so I would strongly encourage that change. And the other one was just the relocation of that statement, which we've already taken care of. So, you know, as Soledad mentioned, I'm sure there will be things that come up in the future, but I feel very hopeful and encouraged with what we've been able to put together. So thank you, Farah. Thank you, everyone on the working group. Especially thank you, City Council and Nuria for all the support that we've had so far. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Adessa, so much for your years of service now on the panel, and also for all the great work on the community working group. And thanks to all the other working group members as well. So we'll come back to you, Farah.
Yes. I think it is now time for questions and answers.
Great. So council questions. I got Junie.
Thank you. I do have one or maybe a couple of questions for you, Farah. That depends as well. And maybe getting some feedback from either the working group as well as part of my question. You mentioned the city manager appointment of panel members and selection. And I went back and looked at again, I appreciate, or at least my understanding, the depoliticization of the process. But at the same time, I feel as though that there's also powers taken away from the panel itself. So I wanted you to talk a little bit more about that and what type of feedback did you receive? Because when you look at the code, there's a very different process for appointment. Mm-hmm. And also when you look at 2-11-6 for panel qualification and appointment, it talks about the requirements as well when it comes to the selection, and also having a written summary sent to council, and then also have it been as part of the consent agenda. So I'm wondering, it doesn't seem like all this is still part of the new process, so I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for the question. It is totally different. So all of that you just mentioned in terms of the summary to council was removed. It's not in there. And essentially, we changed the whole process. I'm not quite sure about the powers of the panel as it relates to the selection process. I don't know in the current iteration of the draft if they had powers per se in the selection process, but what we did specifically put in the current draft is to include current and former panel members a part of the process. That is key, because I think it is really important to have them particularly part of the interview process, part of having them talk to potential panelists so they understand kind of what it is like to serve on a panel. I found that to be very successful and helpful in my past experience. So I think that's important. We specifically put that in the current draft. So I can't sit here and tell you that it's different as it relates to the selection process. It's not different. It's totally different. We took a lot of what you just mentioned completely out and really reframed the conversation. What we did keep in there from the current draft is the section about uplifting those voices that are most disproportionately impacted by policing. And so that, because it was told to us, I can't remember who on the work group, that was an important part. There's something very important to the task force that created or recommended this ordinance, so we wanted to honor that. So we kept that language basically the same. But really outside of that, a council member is totally different. It changes the process. From oversight perspective, it may not be 50-50, but generally speaking, when you talk about appointment of panel members, it's really done by council or your chief executive, either like, the mayor if it's a mayor form of government, or city manager if it's city manager form of government. It's usually just one of the two. So changing it to the city manager is not inconsistent with what we see across the country. It's usually one of the two.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. That's putting the work in line with what's going on nationally. Mm-hmm. But did you get positive feedback with this new model as opposed to the way it was before from either the working group or other people in the community as well? You mentioned that the different groups that you have outreach with, the NAACP. So do you feel that this new model was taken in with positively as opposed to there was more pushback on this new way of this new iteration?
Yeah.
Thank you.
We didn't really get any pushback of changing it from council to city manager. The only pushback was the shall versus may on the advisory committee. That was really because when we talk about the selection process as a whole, we really didn't hear any feedback about the city manager appointment. It was really in terms of should there be a requirement of always having an advisory committee. That was really the consistent feedback throughout that we got.
Thank you. I only have a couple of questions and just one quick comment before those questions. This is an extraordinary piece of work. It's difficulty, it's complexity. I mean, this is awesome. Farah, your entire committee, Soledad and Hadassah. I haven't seen work product like this maybe ever, and it's. You really ought to be commended and be very proud of what you've done. I am in awe. My questions are actually almost insubstantial in light of the achievement that you've done, but I'm going to ask them anyway. First, what's the functional purpose of electing co-chairs as opposed to a chair and a deputy to function when the chair is not available? I mean, what happens if they disagree?
Well, we kept that the same, primarily because it's working, and the panel liked having like two co-chairs, and so I think it's kind of one of those things where that was one of the things that wasn't broken,
Okay.
and it was working, so we kept it the same.
Okay. My other question is, the panel can recommend discipline 10 days before the police chief issues a recommendation. Shouldn't they have 10 days after the police chief makes a recommendation to make their own?
So I don't know if it says recommendation. It's generally you want the recommendation from the panel to come before the chief makes their final decision. Okay. So it's probably not recommendation, it's probably decision. Because that is really important, because if they make the recommendation after decision, it's kind of a moot point at that point. And so you definitely want and it is written in there that the panel makes the recommendation prior to a final determination by the chief of police on discipline.
And my last question is, section 211-9F was a little vague to me. It permits the panel to issue a recommendation that reflects community values. There are sometimes disagreements over what reflects community values. I'm not sure it's that there's one way of looking at things that everybody would subscribe to. So, I mean, in that sense, it was a little unclear to me what it is that was being authorized.
Yeah, so when I think about that, I think about, in particular communities, there's been a big push for de-escalation. Mm-hmm. And in terms of how police react to certain situations. And so I think that potentially could be a community value of Boulder of really implementing and investing in de-escalation tactics. And so that's kind of the context of what we meant by that. Because I think that obviously each community has its culture and its understanding of how they want their community to be. And so those considerations we would want the panel to take into consideration as they're recommending policy. So for example, the community perspective here in Boulder is probably very different than what may be recommended or taken into consideration in Chicago or Austin or a different city. So it's kind of like that recipe that I've talked about, that it's unique to Boulder and Boulder's values.
I'm so impressed with what you've produced. I'm not going to go any further on community values.
Okay.
I just want to commend all of you, the working group, as well as you. This is rare air, and I'm very grateful for what you've done.
I agree with Mark when we look back at the past year or two, how it's been, and so this is fantastic. So I only have one question about shall versus may. Okay, so there's 5 alternates. So when, let's say, somebody decides that they don't want to be on the panel anymore, do you need a shall for picking the next alternate, or are you talking about shall just for when you're like at the last one?
So I'm going to answer this in 2 different ways. So if you have 11 panel members and let's say 1 leaves and you have your 5 alternates, we put in language that because one of the 5 alternates can then just be on the panel because they already will technically be appointed. They'll be part of, so essentially you'll be looking at 16 and not 11, right? So they'll just be able to kind of join the panel. Now, what I think you're getting at is what happens if you get down to 1 alternate. When you get down to 1 alternate, then the city manager has to initiate a selection process. And if you change it to shall, that would include an advisory committee that would be a part of the selection process. So that's really kind of where the shall and may is coming from, so that you won't necessarily have an advisory committee when you have your 5 alternates because you have the alternates, right? That's what they're there for. But it's when the alternates are exhausted, or another situation would be like when you have turnover. So like when we have the 3-term or the 2-year term, you may have, half may turn over if they decide not to renew. And at that point, you would have a selection process, and if you change it to shall, then you would have to have an advisory committee. Does that kind of clarify it a little bit more?
Yes, so what would be the downside of shall?
The downside is we didn't really go, because this is the difficulty with drafting policy, is that you kind of don't want to go too in the weeds because you may unintentionally tighten the situation and not have enough flexibility, particularly as it relates to students. We didn't want to put too much direction as it relates to students because that needs flexibility, right? Because our goal in our conversation, because they felt really strongly about students, is that they want to help the monitor develop a pipeline and a relationship with universities and colleges in the area so that they could either, just come through, right? And so I don't know if you necessarily need an advisory committee for the selection of students, right? That I think can be an internal process. But that's a small piece of that. But essentially, we just thought that we wanted to give just more flexibility to the city manager around this process. But it's also why we were so clear about what the advisory committee should be composed of, because to me that clearly shows the intent of the drafters. Like, we want there to be when there's an advisory committee, they need to have these characteristics, right? So that intent to be there.
Can I colloquy on that, Tara? Do you mind? Okay, great. Do you mind, Bob? So thanks for that. So it's as I'm thinking about it, it seems like so you'd lose a little bit of flexibility if we changed to shall, and it seems like the potential downside would be maybe a delay in how long an appointment might take is what's occurring. It would take some additional time, process. But let's say that there wasn't an alternate available. Let's say if a student resigned and you have a couple alternates, but neither of them are students. If it took, say, 4 to 6 weeks to appoint a new member, can the panel continue to function in the meantime?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful. Bob?
I really had 2 questions. One, for Farah, just to follow up on the discussion we're having about shall versus may, it occurs to me that there may be three scenarios. One is as you were talking with Tara about the kind of the exhaustion of the alternates, and when we get down to one or two, the city manager would want to replenish that. So that would be one kind of scenario. Another would be, as you mentioned, Farah, we might have a batch of people who are just coming to the end of their term, right? And that may be several people at the same time. And then the third, you mentioned also in your exchange with Aaron about students, and I think we anticipate, obviously, they can have shorter terms, but also there's just maybe more turnover with students. So I assume that it's possible, I know we'll have a discussion after the public hearing about this as well, that we could craft the language such that there may be shall language with respect to some of those types of appointments and may with respect to others of those.
Yeah.
In other words, we could say may with respect to students because we just anticipate more turnover, but maybe shall with respect to end of the term, which there'll be a big batch of people coming on board, and maybe the city manager really does want to consult with the advisory committee on that. Is that I assume
Yeah,
that
and that would be
drafting,
consistent with the conversations within the work group.
yeah, okay,
Mhm.
that's great. That's great. That's
Very
kind of what I
consistent.
thought. Maybe we can think about it in those three buckets as we go forward here.
Yeah.
Soledad, do you mind if I ask you a question? Soledad, first I want to just thank you for just diving right in. I know we just appointed you a few months ago, and suddenly you're redrafting the whole thing. Maybe those fresh eyes were really good, so thanks, Soledad. You'd mentioned a couple times in your testimony a desire to get back to work, which I really, really appreciate. One of the decisions after we make whatever changes or amendments tonight, the council will just have a procedural kind of question. So I wanted to kind of pose it to you and get your personal preference. I know you can't speak for the whole panel. Our choices would be to either pass the ordinance with maybe some amendments on emergency tonight, so it would go into immediate effect. In which case, because the moratorium is scheduled to expire tomorrow, you guys could get back to work next week with the fresh new ordinance. So that would be kind of option one. Option two is if we didn't want to pass on emergency, we could make the amendments tonight, pass on second reading, which means we'd have to come back in 2 weeks or so to pass it on third reading, which would probably be a pretty non-dramatic event, but we would just have to have the passage of time, in which case we would need to do a separate emergency motion tonight to extend the moratorium, because otherwise, you guys will be kind of hanging out there in the wind with the moratorium gone, but no ordinance to operate under. Do you have a personal preference about whether to pass it on emergency tonight and then get back to work next week, or would you like us to not pass it on emergency, pass it on emergency maybe in a couple of weeks and extend the moratorium?
Okay, so I want to be super clear that I'm answering your question
Just you, yeah.
as of my personal preference. Because also just want to be clear that oversight keeps happening. Our new police monitor is working.
Yes.
Complaints keep coming and they are not going unattended, but I really want to be part of them. We, the community, I think, the panel, we want to be part of them. And my personal preference will be to pass, if you will, pass the ordinance tonight so we can get to work. I think there's work to be done in many, many fronts, and considering the amendments that we have talked about. And again, for me personally, it's important to get back to work, and actually, to be honest, to start working, because we didn't get to work that much. So, yeah, that would be my preference.
Great. I know you only speak for yourself, Soleil, but I really appreciate hearing your opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks for that question. Seeing no other question. Oh, got Lauren here with one.
I always like to sneak in one last question. So I guess I had a question about students and what would happen when they graduate, because we have sort of different term limits for students versus other community members. Would it be under this current, or under the new ordinance, that they would be able to do 2 years as students and then 4 years as community members? Or do they, how do you see that working?
So the limitation on the students is 2 years. So if they graduated and they, are in the Boulder community and wanted to apply as being a panel member, non-student panel member, they would be able to do that.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, here's another one, Nicole.
This one's a question for Nuria. I just want to make sure that I understand your response to the hotline on the second point of potentially checking in a little bit sooner than 5 years, just because this work is all still really new. And if I'm understanding, we could basically, if we were to pass this tonight, we could then see about a nod of 5 maybe to, come back to us in 2.5 or 3 years with an update. Is that, am I understanding that right?
Councilmember, you are understanding that right, and whether it's 2 years or whether it's 18 months or whether it's 3 years, certainly that is direction that council can give me about coming back. And we have proffered, as you have your discussion today, at a suggestion about coming back a little earlier, that at least in speaking to the team, that 2 years was deemed perhaps too quick. And that if that were a direction to go, then perhaps a longer period of time. But then there's also, and you can do that in the ordinance by saying in the effective date and then 5 years afterwards, or you can also just give that direction, and we are very happy to heed it.
Can I kind of colloquy on that a little bit, Nicole? You don't mind? Yeah. Sort of following on that, and Farrah made the comment of there's a lot of process to still put in place, and so I guess maybe my question is, when we would start the clock, more or less, on having kind of like all the wheels turning, right? Like everything in place where the panel feels like, all right, we got all our ducks in a row, we've got all our resources, and then start the clock on when review. I would just be worried that if we start that clock and we're doing a review and some things are still not even in place, then are we really reviewing the holistic nature of things? So I just want to be, I'm just sort of curious in terms of timing, like with those things that you and the working group have sort of identified still need to be done. Do you think this is like 6 months? Is it a year worth of still dotting the I's, crossing the T's, getting those extra pieces? I'm just sort of curious, when would we want to start the clock of sort of when we'd want to then have review follow that?
I think it's at least a year.
Okay.
And it's probably more like a year and a half.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, we can go to the public hearing. We've got 4 people signed up to speak. All of you are in person. Each of you will get 3 minutes to address the topic. Our first 3 speakers are Daniel Leonard, Darren O'Connor, and Chris Allred. Daniel.
Hey folks, I'm Daniel Leonard, a founding member of the Police Oversight Panel and its longest serving co-chair for 2 years. I want to thank Tara and Nicole for discussing the ordinance with me and the feedback that I gave, and I reiterate, I am a phone call away for all of you should you want to discuss this. In seeking my own counsel, I was encouraged to share my personal experience tonight. Serving as co-chair has been challenging. While there's been a long line of individuals ready to say how the work should be done, it's a very short line ready to do the work. I've been colorfully labeled naive, fascist, woke, criminal, duped, a dirty liberal, while making progress in protecting oversight in our community. I've taken the devastated and infuriated late-night calls. I've defended oversight in the media and stood up to the skeptics. I've subbed in for panelists and city employees to fill the resource gaps. I've reviewed numerous cases of police misconduct. Personally, I've shown up after the challenges of my day job, faced significant life challenges, and lost family members along the way. I experienced frequent marginalization as a queer man in this work. I've spent a fair amount of time just trying to deal with my own emotional and mental strain. As co-chair, I stepped up and stuck it out through 2 departures, 6 resignations, and a removal of the panelists, through all 3 monitors and the many city staff transitions. I have worked most evenings and weekends and at the center of our problems trying to implement this ordinance. So I believe I bring the experience to fairly judge tonight's rewrite of the law. We did not achieve the promised opportunities for feedback in this process. There was no feedback sessions with the working group before the final draft, and the panel got the draft just hours before our public hearing, leaving over 20 pages of feedback, including my own, unconsidered by the working group and in your packets. I'm told I shouldn't expect more support from the city than the other boards and commissions get, but we are an oversight panel, and the city and the law expect significantly more from us than those other bodies. I'm told I don't understand the limited demands of city resources, but my feedback is primarily how to simplify and create efficiencies in this process. Meanwhile, with this new law, you would expand the panel's duties and responsibilities. If we legally bind community volunteers to these expectations, we have to commit the necessary city support to meet those expectations in the same law. After 3 years of dedicated service, I'm here with 3 minutes during public comment trying to be heard. As you've heard, this is brilliant and exceptional work, but this process isn't finished. What are we hoping to achieve if we have to avoid my experience and my commitment to the community interest in order to achieve it? I urge you to slow the rush to the finish line, allow the working group to consider the remaining feedback, and complete this ordinance in good faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you for your service on the panel. Greatly appreciate that. Now we have Darren O'Connor, Chris Allred, and Lynn Siegel.
Hello again. I find it a bit troubling to hear Daniel's experience. I appreciate the work Farah and her team did, but I think we need to remember that the intent of this is to include the voices of community, of excluded communities that have not been involved in police oversight before. The very first aim of the police oversight panel, after Zaid Atkinson, a black man, was held at gunpoint by an officer and then surrounded by 9 officers, was to make sure that never happens again. And what we're doing here tonight probably won't affect that. They do include some good things, the ability to investigate critical incidents, thank you for that, and to challenge the chief's final decision in person, that's great, but there's still no appeals process. The chief still makes the final decision no matter how upset people are on the panel. POP members also no longer have the duty to develop criteria by which to evaluate the police monitor, and there's no requirement that they evaluate the police monitor, thus eliminating a checks and balances that's very important. You know, I don't know our current police monitor. I was really unimpressed with the previous one. I think police oversight includes watching each other, the monitor, working with the oversight panel and vice versa, and evaluating. The original selection process was not broken. The language about real or perceived bias was. I'm glad that that's been fixed with the language about the ability to be objective and transparent. Fantastic. But the criteria now includes that a potential POP member may, as not a requirement, but it's desired that they may value equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I think we have a lot of shall be mays tonight, and kind of sounds like plaintiffs in a lawsuit. But shall be may is very, very important. I think that members of the panel should have to value diversity, equity, and inclusion, going back to the legislative intent. It's just wrong to me that the city manager now does the selection. You know, I think a lot of Nuria, even though we're very much in disagreement on other issues tonight. But again, it was the intent from the beginning that the community be involved. You know, I was on the first selection panel. Another member of our NAACP was on a selection panel. It worked. The problem was the criterion and how we all interpreted it. Last thing, changes in the ordinance presented tonight terminate 2711-D and E, taking away the POP's ability to access police data and to look for trends that can identify bad officers or bad behavior. I think that's a mistake.
Okay,
Thanks for the
Darren.
extra time.
Yep. Okay, now Chris Allred and Lynn Siegel.
Good evening. Good evening, Council. Chris Allred with Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you for the presentation. And thank you to everyone on the police oversight panel who has done this very difficult job with a lot of pressure. And I'm here in solidarity tonight with Darren O'Connor. I would like to thank him very much for helping me to understand this. I think he's done a lot of hard work through the years and understands the issue very well. as a representative of NAACP. And I also thank the representatives from the panel who spoke tonight. And I am concerned to hear about Daniel's experience, about the pressures of this panel. And I think that what I'm hearing is that this needs more time for community engagement. And we need to be hearing more voices for feedback on this. So that would be my main recommendation, is that to take more time for feedback on this, because it cannot be a rushed process. I do remember when Zaid Atkinson was held at gunpoint for picking up trash outside of his own apartment. And I remember when Sammy Lawrence was assaulted by an officer, physically assaulted, tackled for filming an arrest of a homeless encampment. He was fully within his rights to do so, and he was being respectful to the officer, to add to that. So we do need to remember the origin of this police oversight panel. I believe it did have an origin with being led by the community. So I am concerned about it being changed, the appointment process being changed to one person. I think that it is very important that that language include shall form an advisory committee, because originally 2 nonprofit groups were involved in the appointment process. That included NAACP and El Centro Amistad. I think we need to keep that foundation intact to include the community in the selection process, and I think that provides transparency as well in the appointment process to have more voices involved. And a couple other comments I'd like to echo that Darren mentioned. I think that the police oversight panel does need to have access to police data to track trends of bad behavior. And I think that, well, I think we need more time to review this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Lynn Siegel, you're our last speaker.
The first thing that I don't really understand about this, and excuse me for my ignorance, is how Lisa Sweeney Moran could be removed for having a bias, because everyone has a bias about everything. That when it comes down to it, it's just impossible to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone has a bias or doesn't have a bias one way or another. I agree with Darren. I agree with Chris. And I wonder if we couldn't have, if there's things, Nuria, that are just not understood between people. The NAACP doesn't understand or agree with Redfern, etc. Then let's have a community discussion too. That will inform the greater bodies that are working on this, and take the time to do that. Not that Farah hasn't done a great job, and everyone, on this. And I want the police too. But I was really upset about, the elk being shot. The elk being shot. And Stan being threatened, the prosecutor being threatened after he was sentenced. There's a big problem in our community if we have that. It's a big problem that goes everywhere and went straight to George Floyd. So let's take the time and do what needs to be done. And with the community intimately involved in understanding, call me an eternal optimist.
Thank you, Lynn. Does anybody have any follow-up questions from public comment? Yep, Junie, Matt. And then I've got one.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for Farah for clarification. Can the panel get access to data, whether through the monitor or some other way? Just some clarification, please. Thank you.
So that's currently in the draft 211-16. It's actually section A. It's the exact same language that's in the current draft, that they should have access to BBD policies and any data captured and maintained by the department. The other thing I want to add to that is that we took it a step further in terms of saying that the panel can furnish additional reports and be made available that include patterns relating to complaints and other related matters that may come from the panel's review of police department policies, procedures, and other pertinent data analysis. So my perspective is we actually took it a step further for what the panel will be able to do in terms of data analysis and reporting on police procedures and policies.
My question would be for Daniel, really with regards, I appreciate you coming up to sort of respond. For one, thanks for your service and your long tenure on the police oversight panel. And, you know, you and a couple others have sort of mentioned that you would request more time. And I know that we're also up against that tomorrow's deadline sort of comes up. And so I just wanted to kind of ask, how would you reconcile those issues of the moratorium kind of ending tomorrow, but then needing more time? And so I'm just sort of wondering how much time, and then what would you suggest we do in the interim with that stoppage sort of terminating tomorrow?
Totally, and that's something, actually the co-chairs have been talking with Aaron about this as well, about the customary 30-day delay before an ordinance goes into effect too, to give us time to develop those policies and procedures. One of the things under the new ordinance that we're discussing as well is the little hiccup that in order to resume business, actually the moratorium would not allow us to resume business. We would need to get an exemption from the city manager to, on the required training in order to do any voting, so to conduct any business as a panel, or else we need to provide that training, which can take as much as 1 to 3 months to get a time that works for all the panel members. And so there's that time lag as well. And so all around, you know, for resuming panel business, it's we want to get back to work as soon as possible, but we also have to be able to get back to work with confidence and, you know, with an alignment with the law. So my preference, and as I talked with Nicole, you know, really we have till November 2nd. There are 2 weeks here in front of us where we could take the time to consider this final feedback, to look through it, make sure we've checked for any other administrative errors, any other efficiencies that we could build into this process with the eyes that have worked through this ordinance. And so, you know, honestly, my preference would be to take that time, let the working group look at the feedback. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. You know, tell us, at least consider what we're putting in these packets here. And take the time, pass it November 2nd, and then, yeah, we have the conversation with Aaron, we have the conversation with Nuria to say what that on-ramp to getting the panel business back to work is. And part of that, too, a lot of the panel, you know, like Soledad said, right, we never got into our rhythm with the new panelists as well, and so we need to make sure we're taking the time to check the boxes on training, policies, to get the work going. Yep.
So I appreciate that, and sort of what I'm hearing is, you know, a couple weeks is sufficient, at least is from your perspective, to sort of provide and feel like that input's been heard. But in the meantime, we have to figure out how do we make sure that as a panel you're in compliance after tomorrow.
Exactly.
And so that really comes down to 2 process things, which is, do we pass this whole thing on emergency tonight?
Yeah.
Do we stick with a regular schedule but have to do an emergency on an extension of the moratorium to keep everybody clean from complaints, and then get us back on track? And so I'm just trying to understand a way to have our cake and eat it in that sense.
Exactly. So. And I think part of it, too, is so if we did move it to that additional reading for November 2nd, you know, I think the preference, as Hadassah actually communicated with Nuria and Legal, is that the preference would actually be to extend that moratorium. So we wouldn't go back to business under the old ordinance, because chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we would go ahead and extend that moratorium until either the emergency passage or until the law goes into effect after those 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I appreciate it. Thanks for
And that's my
clarifying.
understanding. I mean, Aaron is
Yeah, we'll probably get to some of those nuts and bolts, but I appreciate you clarifying that perspective and where your input is on that. Thanks, Daniel.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks.
I had a question, but Nicole, you go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think this is probably a question more for Farah, Nuria working group. Is there time within the next 2 weeks for the working group to come together to have a discussion about some of this feedback, to respond, all of that, because 2 weeks is not very much time. So just wondering.
It's not a lot of time, and I can't speak for their, for their schedule. So when we met as a working group, I met with them individually. I gave them a schedule for the whole summer so they could plan in advance. And so I can't speak for what their Tuesdays are, are going to be for the next 2 weeks. The one thing I do feel that there might be some pressure on the current panel to have current panel members to have a lot of this baked. And it's just not the process, right? Like, it's going to take some time. Like, the training requirements that we put in this current draft, particularly, we put in training requirements about what they need to do prior to them taking their first vote. That doesn't necessarily apply to the current panel members because they've taken plenty of votes. That would apply to panel members who get appointed after this potentially passes, right? So it's new appointees. And so we've already been talking about training in terms of other areas. Has always been a conversation with the panel because we really needed to formalize it and get a schedule together. So that has always been an ongoing conversation, but developing policies, that takes time. And so this is going to be a work in progress for a while. And so I want to alleviate any sort of pressure the panel may be feeling that, oh gosh, we have to bake this really quickly. No, you don't. We're giving you a more concrete foundation with this draft, but we're still going to have to work it through in terms of how it's implemented collectively, and that's going to take time.
Yeah, can you go to Teresa? Yes.
Legal review is also a consideration in that, and so 2 weeks is a pretty quick turnaround to get feedback, draft new things, and then expect legal to review to make sure that that new language reflects the intent. And so, I know Aaron will dutifully work day and night, but I request that we think about the timeline a little more than that.
Yes, and both of us will work day and night, right? Both Jeannie.
I do have a question. I think from what I'm hearing as well, I appreciate the tightrope that Farah's trying to walk through as Daniel, the co-chair, has bring this forward, and I can understand that. But Daniel, my question to you, since you came before us, are you speaking for yourself as one individual, or are you speaking on behalf of the entire working group in the panel? So I think that's very different. I mean, I understand you may want us to have the extra time. You're the expert. You're one of the experts as well, but do you speak on behalf of the entire group?
Yeah, I do not speak for the trees. I don't speak for the working group. I wasn't a part of the working group. I wasn't able to join the working group. And I do speak for myself as co-chair. Like I said, it's kind of a lonely place up here. And I'm trying to act in best interests of the panel because a lot of these are experiences. Joey left, Ariel and Taisha finished their terms. Panelists resigned. These problems, many of these problems are ones that I've experienced. I'm the last one here to have experienced them. The last one here to not resign from having experienced them. And so I do speak for myself, but I speak for the bigger picture of being able to do this work. We didn't issue a moratorium lightly. We did it because we had to. We did it because we didn't have the support to continue. If you read my feedback, you'll see that the issue as I raised before and after the working group weren't addressed on how that moratorium came about.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
So I think we're good. Okay. So thank you for all those follow-up questions. And so I'll turn back to council now, and I think maybe we can address issues that have been raised kind of one at a time. I've got three that I'm thinking of. One is the may versus shall and the community engagement.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Before, I believe there's somebody else who wanted to say something. Is that what I'm hearing?
Martha from the work group.
Oh, is Martha, did you want to address us?
I apologize if is that right?
I was going to get a question.
Sorry, Martha.
I don't I don't want to.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
Oh, yes, Martha Wilson. I am a former panelist, but I was also on the work group, part of the writing team. I want to say that I'm one of those people who just likes feedback from everybody. I think that there were many opportunities for people to come forward to provide that feedback. Unless I hallucinated, I was sitting right next to Daniel during one of the community feedback sessions. So I'm a little bit shocked to hear that it expressed like there was an opportunity for those things. I do think that this may be problematic timing-wise to delay it, only because in addition to work, in addition to my volunteering, I am sitting in the trial for what's going on in Aurora as people are standing up to fight this very thing with police brutality. So I don't know that I can endure that trauma and then come in and talk about a work group with things that have been thought out, discussed. There's been opportunity to talk. I think that the way that it's done now, is solid enough that I'm kind of sad that I'm not on the panel anymore to run with it and take it to the next level and take it to dot the I's and cross the T's with it in the bylaws. But I just wanted to just reemphasize that, our door is open. It was open from the point in time when this was released. And there was a similar time frame with the introduction of the first one. Not all feedback is, we can't get everybody to agree. But I do think that this particular version is solid enough that the things that are in, the sections of edits can be tweaked with just a little bit of careful review. So that was it, but I just wanted to reemphasize that, the work group, it was passionate debate at times, but the middle ground, I think, is always going to be the path that represents the entire community, so that that voice can carry over, so that we can hit those elements of accountability, responsibility, and ultimately prevention. So that was my thought.
Thanks for that, Martha. And I just really maybe quickly give if Adas or Soledad had any other follow-up quick thoughts, and we should move on to discussion.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so when we start discussing the who was going to be part of the work group, it was the two co-chairs that were part of the work group. And we raised the concern that we got to this point, we were a number of new panelists and we didn't have a voice. And I took that place. So I took that call out, if you want, because I took Daniel's place in the work group. And as Martha said, we had several opportunities to provide feedback. We had, and also I think Farah made herself available to long conversations via phone, in person, via Zoom, to go over and review things. So if you think that we met on Tuesday and okay, I'll see you next Tuesday, there were phone calls probably every single day with every single one of us and members of the panel. So I'm puzzled a little bit because I think the opportunities were there. And in all honesty, like, I feel that my voice as a person of color, as an immigrant, was very important. I think my voice is not my own voice. I don't ever think that I speak for people, but I do have, I think I bring something to the table that other people don't, and it was true, I think, in the work group. So we can't think that one voice is more valuable than other. And I feel personally touched because I took Daniel's place. And I think my voice was important as a new panelist, and because of my identity and because of the work that I have been doing in the community for the last for the 5 years that I've been living in Boulder. So, yeah, and I agree with Marta. I think we have a very solid foundation here. So, yeah, just want to thank you for the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, Soledad. And I don't know, Hadassah, if you wanted to say something, no requirement.
Yes, yeah. All I wanted to mention was it was part of my requests that when the vote happens tonight, if it is a, yes, approve ordinance, awesome. If it's a no, then it's a no and an extension of moratorium. I would not want to see us choose to delay that vote and just leave it hanging like has been mentioned. So that is a very strong feeling that I have. If we're saying no, then that should also require that we are extending the moratorium.
Okay.
It's my initial request. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And, I am going to ask one last follow-up question before we go to discussion, which was about, Daniel mentioned about not always having the resources. The panel didn't always have access to the resources necessary to conduct the work. There was a consideration of that. What do we have to make sure that the panel has what it needs to do its work?
Mayor, thank you for that question. And I think that we will continue to work with the panel to see what is needed as we move forward. I think that we have had some staff turnover on the administrative side as we move forward, but we have always tried to have somebody there to support. It's hard for me to speak to when the panel first started and how that worked. We have heard and had conversations about additional training. We've provided some of that training, some of it with legal, some of it while Farah has been here. We will continue to work with our new monitor, with Sherry, to see what that looks like. And as we have needs and whether those contain financial resource needs in the future, we will bring that through the budgetary process. And if there are other ways that we can support the panel with either if there is additional personnel or additional staffing resources, we expect to hear that through the monitor so that we can continue to support like we would with any of our other boards and commissions as we move forward.
Great. But we do have an organizational commitment to ensure that the panel can do its work.
Absolutely. Right? I'm sorry. And if that was part of that question, let me stand before you and say we support the work of our oversight. I believe it is a critically important work in what we do. And when we perhaps may not, if somebody were to be on vacation and needed to do it, we have a full component of administrative staff and CMO who is there to help. We've actually changed our structure so administratively we can support that as we move forward. But we will find, as we continue to move forward, ways in which we continue to lift up and provide training and resources and answers and legal support to whatever as we move forward.
Great. Thanks for that. Okay, so if I can now, I don't think I formally closed the public hearing, so I'll close the public hearing. And then come back to council. And as I mentioned, I wanted to have specific items that I think we need to discuss. So I'm going to mention 3 that I have heard. One is about the may versus shall on the community involvement in the appointment process. One is about what potentially coming back to this sooner than 5 years and whether we do that in ordinance or in direction. And the other one is the exact timing in terms of, are we passing something tonight, or are we waiting a little bit, or what are we doing with the moratorium, et cetera. Does anybody else have any other buckets that they would like to be included in our discussions? Seeing none. Oh, yeah, Lauren?
I thought the point about the panel member qualifications and having the value of equity, diversity, and inclusion as a may is maybe we could find a way to have that be more closer to a shall than a may.
Okay, we shall discuss whether to make that a shall.
Can I have a quick colloquy question about that?
We'll get to it. How about, so that's now on our list, and then we'll get to it. And because I'm thinking we'll start with the public engagement may versus shall, then the timing, and then that question, and then what we're doing tonight. So if that works for folks, then let's start with the may versus shall on the public engagement in the appointment process. Yep, Mark?
I'm going to make a general comment that incorporates that. The work group and our consultant looked at that. They came to a conclusion. I know it is always our bent to micromanage these kinds of statutes, and I would encourage us to simply move forward on emergency, pass this statute, and if there's any portion of it that proves not to be workable or not to be working well, it's within our discretion to fix it on whatever schedule we deem appropriate. But the work product that has been delivered to us, I just think ought to be taken as a whole, without our ingenious tinkering, and let them go do their work. And as I said, if any portion of it doesn't pan out, if it turns out we must have shall instead of may, we can make that decision later. But I just don't think this is the appropriate moment for us to be tinkering with language in that fashion. I think we have a great statute in front of us. I want to honor the work that was done by the working group and our consultant. And, for us to be sitting here and tinkering with verbiage just doesn't make any sense to me.
Thanks for that, Mark. I might turn to Lauren, because Lauren, you brought this up via hotline originally, so did you want to speak to it?
Sure. I mean, I think community members have already done a really good job of speaking towards this, but I think that community and having control in some form for this panel lie within the community is really important. This was formed from community outrage at a particular event, and I think that maintaining that power in this ordinance is important.
Very good. Other thoughts, Nicole, Matt?
Yeah, one of the things that I was noticing, Bob brought up the idea of having the may refer to students, and Farah, it seemed like that was kind of exactly in line with what the working group had put forward, whereas the shall was really more meant to be about the more than 1 year student appointments. And so just want to offer, maybe if we're thinking about doing this tonight, that we take that approach, because I think it seems like it meets what the working group was talking about in the discussions, and also fits with some of what we've heard from I think actually both co-chairs and Hadassah, who was on the working group as well. So maybe that's a middle point.
Thanks. Matt?
Nicole went right where I was going to go, is just finding that middle ground. I think the shall is maybe most critical when we're dealing with new panel members. And I think the may is that flexibility, either when it's some weird off-cycle resignation and we're kind of caught in a pickle where, maybe we don't need that. And candidly, talking to Nuri, I'll let maybe Nuri speak for herself, but I can't see our city manager just not embarking on this process whenever and however possible in the maximum efficacy. So I have faith in our city manager to be including community quite ubiquitously on that front. So I think a hybrid approach, to the extent that Bob and Nicole are discussing, I think is quite relevant and probably a good way to go.
Great. I'll call on myself, if I may. Which say I'm interested in this change, and then I'll go to you, Rachel. I'm interested in this change, and I think, Mark, you made a good point at this. I think this is an extraordinary body of work together, But I also heard that the panel went back and forth on this, and so there's some differences of opinion, and it can work in different ways. So this idea of the kind of middle ground appeals to me. So after I hear from Rachel, I might straw poll whether people are willing to take that approach. Rachel?
Yeah, I just had a middle ground question maybe for Nuria or Farah. What I understood maybe was the concern with Shell is that we would have to convene a panel, maybe more than once in a year or at super frequent intervals that might be difficult to manage. So is there some temporal shell we could put in there, like that you shall impanel not more than once every X, whatever the right time is? I don't know if that can even be heard or if I didn't make sense.
Oh, trust me, it could be heard on here, but that's because our audio today is a little off, nothing to do with you. And maybe I'll take a crack at it to make sure I understand it correctly, and Farah can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know, other than a case in which we have end of term, and there would be a big turnover of panel members, that it would sort of be a moment in time, temporal trigger, sort of point in time to do that. I'm trying not to use the word trigger myself in how I speak in general. I do think that when we have vacancies come up, unlike perhaps other boards and commissions, we will have a sizable pool of alternates by which to slot folks in. And it is only when we are down to one that we start again in the process. So that is not barring wholesale walking off and resignations. We are not anticipating that happening. So the only temporal place I can think of it is, well, I guess it's twofold. It is for the entire panel. It is when their terms end, and there is a moment in time where that has to be thought up more broadly. And then I will say, and that is the case with students, and I think it was the reason the working group, I think, wanted to give the manager some more flexibility, because students could, either given their workload or their schedule, they could just turn over more frequently. That's all. Am I right in that?
You are right, and I can give another example about flexibility. So, for example, when I did the search in Austin, we had like over 70 applications for 10 spots. So I used the other 60 for my pool. So when I had a vacancy, I went back to the pool, but they still had to go through the vetting and interviewing process. But I didn't use I had a blind review panel. I didn't use them because they'd already done that part. So when I needed new panelists, I was just able to go back to the pool and then make a recommendation of who I thought should be interviewed. And they were interviewed, which was a panel of community, the police department, city management, before they were recommended to the city manager for appointment. So, so essentially, where that flexibility comes in is that if you have a pool that you can go back to, do you need an advisory committee to review that pool? Or can the city manager just, through whatever process he or she creates, come up with a few people to interview, have an interview panel, and then that, can then be recommended for, appointment. So there's a lot of ways this can go. This is why policies need to be drafted. But I do think Rachel's point might be difficult to draft. I think that might put us in a pickle in terms of how it's interpreted down the road. But I think if it's the will of council, the hybrid approach is probably a cleaner way to draft it, because we could have a section that's, about students, and, clearly say the city manager shall have, flexibility in the appointment, of students, and then we just change the may to the shall, and this should be this will apply to non-student appointments on the panel, right? And so I think there's a way to clean that up. I'm just a little worried about making it too convoluted, because then that causes issues down the road. So I would highly recommend a cleaner approach if that's the will of the council.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
So then maybe I can straw poll. So Farah just suggested this kind of middle path in terms of change may to shall, but have a different language around student appointments for more flexibility. How many people are interested in taking that approach? All right, we got a clear majority. And so that what I might ask is, while we're continuing our discussion, maybe somebody could come up with proposed language to accomplish that for when we get to a potential motion later on. Great. Next question is about coming back to this sooner than 5 years. And then here I just might straw poll, is there interest in having us revisit this in some way sooner than 5 years?
I want to discuss that first.
Yeah. Well, just at all, whether that's through an ordinance or, do you want to make a comment, Matt, first before I?
Yeah. I mean, I think as we heard from Farah, we're not going to be running at full capacity, at least for 18 months from when we pass this. So I don't want to bake that into ordinance. And then even then you go 18 months and then you add 3 years. You're right. You're sneaking up on 5 years, just right up onto itself. And so I think we're kind of, we're trimming seconds here and quarter orbits around the sun. So I think we can avoid it. And I mean, it's 364 and a quarter, and we get the 4 years leap year thing. Like, so let's not play that game too much. So I think the 5 makes total sense, and stick with it.
May I comment?
Lots of comments now. Yeah, you got Mark, Bob, Tara.
And if circumstances change, they change, and we adapt and take a look at it in 4.25 years. But trying to draft around that now, to me, makes no sense.
Bob?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Matt and Mark. I think, I mean, and we can't really bind future councils anyway. I think that it's either going to be working or it's not. And if it's not working, it's going to be pretty obvious to all of us. And the panel and the monitor are going to come back to the city manager and to us and say, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or they may come back in 5 years and say, don't screw with it. It's going just fine. So I'm not sure I'd hardwire a drop dead date. If it's not working a year and a half from now, we're going to modify it. And if it's working great 5 years from now, we're not going to modify it.
Okay, Tara?
I think we should do it sooner than 5 years because in the world of unintended consequences, my favorite subject, there's not a world where we're going to have a perfect ordinance, and you can't tell, i.e. the last few years or the last year, when something is going to happen. So I think baking it in is better, in my opinion, for that reason that we will not be under pressure to have a perfect ordinance, because it's important for me that we do this before the new council, right? So if we say, well, if we look at it sooner, then it'll just be better and less pressure.
Lauren? And then a suggestion.
Yeah, I agree with Tara. I think that especially as we start to implement some new things, it might become apparent right away that there are things that need to be changed. It's possible. And I think that we should be open to that and making changes quickly if the need arises. I don't have a timeline for it, but I guess maybe so perhaps it's not part of the ordinance, but perhaps part of procedure.
So I have a suggestion, then Rachel, I'll go to you. My suggestion is that hearing some disagreement on this, that maybe we consider direction rather than an ordinance change. And maybe that's something we could generally agree on is to give direction to look at it sooner than 5 years as appropriate, something to that extent. So that's my suggestion. I'll go to Rachel and then check in with people.
But just, this is a question, I guess, for Teresa. Like, in general, if there was an issue, would we not be brought a request for a change at whatever point it came up?
Absolutely. So I think, Rachel, what I'm understanding your question to mean is like, if the panel members or city staff was noticing the need for a change, couldn't we bring that to council without council having requested it? Is that your question?
And wouldn't you? Wouldn't you
yes, of course.
Generally do that?
Absolutely. In fact, that is part of how we got here.
That's what I'm thinking too. Yeah.
Well said, Teresa. Well said.
So
okay.
I guess back to Aaron, I'm not going to be in your chair, so it but if we do it at 3 years, it's going to be another probably heated election year that y'all are looking at it. And, are we going to wait 2 years beyond when we recognize that something needs to be done? I don't think so. I think we should just give direction. Like, can staff please as soon as they know something, bring it to us so we can change it quickly and not let things build. Because I think we knew a bit in advance that this one was sort of starting to boil, and we didn't take it quick enough. I would just say give direction to make sure to bring this ASAP when we know that things, and not wait to accumulate multiple things that need to be changed, but feel free to bring it quickly.
Nicole?
And it seems to me like one of the things that we're all interested in, and probably the community too, is what all the internal policies, the trainings, all those kinds of things are. And I think I don't think that we need to kind of bake anything into the ordinance, but I think there is a desire among us and probably the community too to just hear how things are going. Like what does it look like? And so that is the kind of thing that I would like to see coming back. And I mean, if 18 months for really give it 2 years, right? A little bit of extra time. So, maybe 3 years, whatever council's there, bring it back, have a conversation about how it's working. What is it? That kind of thing, an update of sorts.
And if I can just colloquy with that, because I think there is a value to having a point where someone takes a step back and says, let's look at it. How's it been going? Like, are we suggesting maybe a couple changes? Obviously, if something's broken, you're going to come back to us, right? But I think there is a potential value to at some point saying, hey, you know what? Let's take a couple of weeks and evaluate it a little bit more. So to your point, I mean, that's something like that. Nura, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just reminded that the Independent Police Monitor also provides an annual update on their work, and that is another area where we can just include how this is working because it's going to be part of that. So there will be additional opportunities for reporting.
Okay. So are we comfortable then saying, just giving direction to say, please come back to us if things are broken, and please do include a check-in sooner than 5 years kind of on how things are working? Is that good enough for folks? Mm-hmm. Okay. Very good. The other one, Lauren, you brought up, I believe I'm going to zero in on this if I may. This is in 211.12, panel members' qualifications and disqualifications. And Section A says the city manager shall consider the following qualifications when appointing members, and there's 7 of them. And then B says panel member qualifications may include, and number 1 is value, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So did you want to make a proposal change?
I mean, I guess it seems like a simple thing might be to move it from the portion under B to the portion under A and make it a requirement instead of a shall.
How do you all feel about that?
Can I ask why? Yeah. Can I call it, please? Why was it made in the first place?
I don't really remember why we put it as made, to be quite honest with you. I think that they wanted that included, right? And so, and to make sure that it was included. And so I can say that Whitfield has really probably no opposition to it being a shall, but they felt like those characteristics should be included. So that's why you see that as added language, because it wasn't there before. And there are other parts in it where you talk about the selection process, where we talk about is guided by the principles of inclusion and transparency. And so it is kind of a theme throughout the document and throughout our recommendations. So this is not a major change.
Okay. Yes, Ginny?
That's great. If you decide to change it to shall, and number 4 says members serving on panels are not required to be U.S. citizen, maybe you might want to decouple that number 4, because I'm thinking, yes, you can go out there and trying to find people who are not U.S. citizen, but when it becomes a requirement that you go out there and find people who are U.S. citizen, not U.S. citizen, I think it kind of distort what you're trying to do here, if that makes sense.
Yeah, our point for including that is that we wanted an affirmative statement to the public to let them know you did not have to be a citizen to serve on this.
Okay.
We wanted an affirmative statement saying that, because I think there could be assumption of the other way, that you need to be, a citizen to serve on a panel like this, and so the work group wanted something that clearly states you do not have to.
So we would not disqualify if somebody was not a U.S. citizen.
So it's not saying, you're not saying that in order to be, you must have a, because when it becomes a shall, what you're saying is that you must have a panel member who are not a U.S. citizen.
No, this is under may,
Okay.
not shall. So what Councilmember Goldfuss is talking about is putting the value of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the A portion. Right, under shall. And so the remaining would still be, sorry. The remaining would still be may.
Okay, thank you. That's exactly what I was.
I'm sorry, was that, did I represent that correctly? Okay.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
And, we are getting some feedback, so folks can generally keep their microphones off when they're not speaking, but also turn them on when you are speaking.
It's like a xylophone.
That's right. So then I'll straw poll how many people are interested in moving it from the may section, value, equity, diversity, inclusion from the may section to the shall. All right, we got a majority on that. Not quite everybody, but a majority.
Aaron, I couldn't hear anything Farah said, so I'm not going to vote either way on this one.
Oh, okay. I mean, to sum it up, she basically said that was fine. I think.
Then I support.
Did I get that right, Farah?
Yes, sir, you did.
Okay. There are lots of other good things in there too, but the sort of. Okay, great. And so if you all could have suggested wording, because I think it has to be slightly rephrased to move into that other section as well. And any other, Matt?
Just one other thing I wanted to touch on. One other thing that sort of touches on 2-1110, sort of panel appointment process, and in that sort of section B, sort of refers to what that community input is and really defines kind of that process, and something that I look back at some of the challenges that kind of brought us to where we are today, and we've clarified that a lot in certainly the panel member qualifications and disqualifications. But with regards to expectations in the process, one thing I'd love to see added in here is our process for evaluating applicants kind of mimic the voir dire process of jury selection. I think that's a well-known, well-established way in which we view individuals to be impartial, to sort of be in the middle, to not be on one extreme or the other. And we know what that is, and I think that sets a community expectation of, we've all served in jury duty, and we understand that if you're coming in and you're way off on out in the left field or right field, you're not going to be selected. And yet jurors are meant to sort of be down the middle in that capacity, and I think that may ultimately be what we're striving for on this panel. And so I think that's a way to connect it to a process we're all familiar with and setting appropriate community expectations and for that of the panel. So just further definitionally and just adding something in there for solidifying those expectations.
Thank you, Councilmember. I 100% agree with that, and I think it's fundamentally part of the process and procedures that we put into place about the selection process. So I have personally been through this. I did the selection process in Austin, where we looked for panel members, and part of their criteria were panel members that could be objective and that were in the middle. So it was part of the questions that we asked them, it was part of our application process, and it was part of the interview process. And it was part of the questions that I asked them too. So I think that is what we delineate specifically in the policies and procedures that we develop about the selection process. That would be my recommendation.
Is that good?
As long as it's noted and we in that 18 months that we have to work that in there, we fold it in there. That'd be awesome. Appreciate that, Farah. Thanks.
Very good. So then our remaining question is, what are we doing tonight? So we have a few options in front of us in terms about timing, whether we're passing tonight, we're delaying, or we're extending the moratorium. So if people have thoughts on what we want to do. Bob, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'll just kick us off. We obviously have a split of view on this from panel members and, well, both people on the panel and people that were in the working group. So I really appreciate what Martha and Soleil had to say about let's get to work. And I know the lawyers are fine-tuning. I'm stalling Aaron to give you time to draft. I'll talk really, really slowly here. But I think in a second or two we're going to have something up on the screen that's going to reflect everything we talked about tonight. And if it truly was just a week or two to have some more community engagement, that would be fine. But it sounds like, based upon what Teresa said, it's not going to be, and what Farah said, it's not going to be a week or two. We'd have to reconvene the working group, we'd have to do more community engagement. I'm afraid that this could potentially spill into the next council. This council's worked hard on this, and it's been very close to this, and I'd hate to have new people have to come in and start all over from scratch. I really appreciate what Soleil said about getting back to work. And this has been going on for many, many months, and I think it's been a very, very thorough process. My preference, personal preference, would be to pass this tonight, be done with it, let the working group, rather the panel, get back to work. I know there's a lot of work ahead of them, rather than kicking it down the road 2 weeks, which probably turns into 4 weeks, which starts to slip into the next council, and so that's my preference. And that way we don't have to fiddle with the moratorium. We just let it lapse and allow this ordinance to go in effect right away.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Clarifying question. I don't know if this is for you, Bob. I'll pose it. Maybe staff answers. But it was brought up that if we do this, are you referring to passing this on emergency?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
Okay, so then it goes into effect immediately, and then these rules are then immediately governing the panel. On
I'm sorry I wasn't clear. Yes, okay. I'd suggest that we pass this on emergency tonight and be done with it.
Okay.
Rachel, you had your hand up, but it's down. Did you want to speak?
No, down. It's not working very well from my end either. Sorry.
No worries.
Something going on with the microphones.
Okay. So
this is Nuria's plan because she desperately wants us to approve money to redo the audio in this place.
Right.
Her Halloween tricks are at play.
I think we've already approved that funding, and the day cannot come soon enough. So I'm going to straw poll about whether people are interested in this. I personally like the approach that Bob put forward to let the panel get back to work. So all in favor of taking that general approach. Very good. That's unanimous. So then I think the next step might be for someone to make a motion unless there's any other particular issues that somebody wants to bring up. Great. Then, Aaron, yes, we do. I'm gonna turn to you. How are we doing on proposed language changes?
I don't think my mic is turning on. I'm not getting a.
No, there we go. There we go. That worked.
I think we're doing
nope.
language changes.
Okay, actually, I don't think you're mic'd up, but.
Okay. Okay, is this better?
Try again.
Is this better?
Okay, just try to speak a little loudly there.
I could hear it if that's helpful.
That's right. It needs to pass the Rachel test.
No, that's good.
Okay. So lean on in, speak up.
Language is going well. We have some proposed language that we've vetted on the small table here that we can share when you're ready.
I think we're ready.
Okay. In the new proposed 21110C, and this is regarding the shall versus may issue, I propose changing subsection C to read, the city manager shall form an advisory committee to assist in the panel selection process for regular panel positions. Because in another part of the ordinance, regular is defined as not being the student. So I think if we say that, we can just leave the student part out and the city manager can develop policies regarding the selection of students.
Oh, that's very simple. She's
Being simple. All right. And then in our proposed 21112, in subsection A, to add as a new subsection 8, the language, a commitment and understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are criteria the city manager shall consider, and removing from subsection B, number 1, which previously said value, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So slight language change and moving it up.
That sounds clean.
What number is that one?
Was there something else?
211-9, we would, this is the bylaws issue and making sure that it's obvious that the panel can create its own bylaws. Can I look at that? Yeah, so in subsection C, complaint review, we would delete number 1, which is the in collaboration language, authorizing the panel to establish policies, procedures, and operating principles, and take that same language and create a new subsection J, so that it's clear that the authority to do so is not limited to complaint review, but it's all of their responsibilities.
Great. So I wonder if someone might like to make a motion that incorporates these changes.
Try.
Yeah.
I move consideration of a motion to adopt Ordinance 8609, repealing and reenacting Chapter 211, Police Oversight, BRC 1981, redefining the composition, duties, and powers of the city organization related to civilian oversight of the police, and setting forth related details, including such language as has been approved by this council this evening.
By emergency.
By emergency action. And.
No, the second one is no longer relevant. That's a good motion.
Say nothing.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Great. And lawyers, was that clear enough?
It did the language, and I apologize for not catching it, include the amendments as proposed by staff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Then, Alicia, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Yes, sir. Let me pull up my vote sheet. We'll start the roll call for the adoption of Ordinance 8609 with Councilmember Friend.
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Yes.
Councilmember Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Benjamin?
Yes.
Mayor Brockett?
Yes.
And Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
Ordinance 8609 is hereby adopted as an emergency measure unanimously, as amended.
Amazing. I have a few thoughts. Nicole?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer some thanks, which is probably where many people are interested in going. This was just so much work and done in such a short period of time and done really efficiently. So thank you to the working group, everybody who was on it. It was hard work. You work through disagreement. I remember a few months ago, it was sounding like we weren't going to get to a place where folks were agreeing, and I just want to thank you. That was hard. And thank you to the co-chairs and the current and previous panel members as well. You had to deal with many bumps and probably a couple dumpster fires along the way, and thank you for persisting and getting us here. And then also thank you to staff, and especially thank you to Farah. It's very clear you fostered an environment where people felt safe and could have open and authentic conversation, and you really got us to a great place. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in this. This is amazing progress.
Jenny. Matt.
Thank you so much, Mayor Brockett. I had already packed, but I said I need to unpack so that I can thank you, Farah. Thank you, Farah, for all your work in this great presentation. I also wanted to point that I appreciate your recommendation of a possible advisory committee to assist the city manager, and I also wanted to point you to Section 2, which is to amplify the voice of most impacted by police interactions, for example, BIPOCs and LGBTQ plus community members. I do believe that our community value LGBTQ plus people in our community and their safety, and also BIPOC, so thank you for that, and I thought that was a great presentation, and also thanks to council and staff. It's been truly a tremendous work. Thank you.
Soledad said it I think the quote of the night, it's not perfect, but perfectible. And I'm not sure anything could have been as succinctly stated for this. And so I'll likely butcher by saying a few extra words. I could have left it at that, but I didn't.
It won't quite be perfect what you say, Matt.
No,
it'll be perfectible.
it'll be perfectible. Yeah, in someone's eyes for sure. That's what my children always tell me. It was a pretty. We were in a pretty dark and rough place not long ago, and I think there was justifiable concerns that the path out of that into the light was going to be hard, if not possible. And here we are. I'm just really excited that we got to this place. And for the working group, the panel to stick with this work, for those that, like Daniel, who have stayed committed, kudos to you guys. And Farah, you've been the glue that really brought this together. And so just absolute gratitude for what you're able to do to take us from what was almost an intractable position and come out of it where I think we're at a place where we've maybe reset things to start building back that trust across a bunch of sectors in our community. And I hope we continue to build on that. And I think this was just a start to go from eroding to a place where we can start to rebuild. And I'm just grateful that we're at that place of opportunity. So just thanks for community and everybody who's had a significant part in this. And it's a great place to be. So a lot of work to go, but this is a great starting place. Thank you.
I wanted to give a special thanks to Daniel, Martha, Milen, Soledad, and so many others who took the time to talk with me on the phone. I realize that we all work, you work, I work, and you were there for me really to give me your perspective and help me to understand how you were feeling and listen to what I was feeling. That was really special. It was probably the hardest council meeting I ever had, or a series of meetings, should I say. But getting to know you guys was just tremendous, and thank you for that.
Not to take away from all the thanks that have been gushed out the last couple of minutes, all of which I agree with. I also want to thank our colleague Lauren for improving the ordinance at the last minute and making some very well-received suggestions.
Here. Rachel?
Yeah, I echo everything, and also just wanted to say we had a clearly very flawed ordinance for a couple years, and so a special thank you to Amy Kane for trying to just sort of shoulder on with all of the panel members and people impacted by the ordinance. I know that could not have been an easy job, so just a broad thank you to everyone who's been involved, including staff. Thanks.
So I'll call on myself. It's been an incredibly rocky road for the police oversight panel, right? And I've been there throughout the whole process, right? From the incident with Zaid Atkinson, and that led us to the initial formation. There have been so many steps along the way, and we were in a pretty dark place earlier this year, and I was losing hope for the success of this effort in our community. And here we are with a ray of light and all the hope restored. And it's just extraordinary that it's come to this place. And just so incredibly grateful to all the people who've done the hard work to get us here. Farah, this is absolutely so much your work. You have been a miracle worker here. You've done extraordinary, extraordinary work. Could not be more grateful to you. And so just deep, deep gratitude for coming here. And so good to see you in person. And don't be a stranger. Like, keep talking to us. We'll continue to need your help.
Oh, she's not going anywhere.
Yeah, right?
Let me be clear.
And then just to all the people who have been on the police oversight panel, it's been incredibly tough work, and I'm so grateful to you. And the people here today who've been on the panel, Adasa and Soledad and Milen and Daniel and Martha as well. And Daniel, I know you had some suggestions that weren't taken up tonight. I hope that doesn't feel terrible. I'm just so grateful for the amazing work that you've done. And you have made specific suggestions that have improved it as well. And just keep at it. So much appreciative of you and everybody's been on the panel and the people who've been on the working group. So much hard work, incredible. And Amy has been a guiding star throughout the whole effort and just deserves so much from us. And then the great work of Aaron Poe as well on the legal side and the legal team who's worked on this. And so anyway, I'll stop gushing, but just we're in such a good place and such a better place than we could have ever imagined being here just a few months ago.
Thank you, Mayor, and I don't intend to speak myself, but I understand that Farah wanted to say a few words.
Yes, thank you, Nuri. I just really wanted to take a point of, to talk about something personal. During this process, my father had surgery. Surgery went okay, but he's since passed away. And so the month of September was very, very difficult for me. And I feel like I have to publicly thank city staff, because honestly, I don't know if we would have gotten to this point, because they lifted me up at my lowest. Amy stepped up, the comms team stepped up. I was supposed to come in person for the community event. I couldn't, because they told us that, you know, the time with my father was coming to an end. The work group members checked on me and, you know, contacted me and made sure that I was okay. Panel members did the same. And I want to acknowledge that, because this is such a contentious issue. But when I was going through something hard, the humanity came out and people had my back. And I just really feel like I needed to acknowledge that publicly, because I was a daddy's girl, and this was so hard. But I pushed through because this work is so important to me, and I knew the community needed this to come to an end to start the healing so that we could move forward. So I really want to say a collective thank you to everybody. We still have a lot of work ahead of us, but we really needed to get to this point, and I wouldn't have gotten it, particularly in the month of September, without city staff and Nuria's support. So I feel like I had to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Farah, and I'm so sorry for your loss. Yeah. And with that, Teresa.
Here I am, the little rain cloud. So we did amend the agenda to consider item 5B, the second of those. And so if council could just formally determine whether it plans to take that up for consideration or not. The extension of the moratorium.
Right. So this was the extension of the moratorium, which has been rendered moot by our other ordinance. So can we just get a show of hands? Are we okay not considering this? Okay, great. Did that dot the I there, Teresa? Thanks for keeping us honest. And with that.
That was a swift shower.
Yes, a very brief. I will gavel us closed at the extraordinarily early time of 9:40 p.m. Thanks so much, everybody, for an extraordinary meeting.